Oh,
Yeah.
let's see if we have oil.
Marilyn is ready to go.
Oil. Nope.
One at a time.
You know how we were talking about the Infinite Atlas? We were having a debate about the Infinite Atlas the other day.
Oh, this guy.
Somebody tweeted their video at me about it. How to fix the Infinite Atlas system.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Read More.
So I'm curious. It looks like he's got a whole PowerPoint presentation on how to fix the Infinite Atlas system. A lot of people in the comments here saying good video, very interesting video. All right, Reed Moorebrook, how to fix the Infinite Atlas system in PoE 2 patch 0.5. Haven't seen one of his videos before. The Infinite Atlas is something that's been kind of debated, and people already know my take on this. Like, I actually like the Infinite Atlas, but I think it needs a lot of tweaks. I think it has potential. If they can't get the potential to work properly, then the Infinite Atlas probably won't work. But I would like to see them try to make it work. So I'm kind of curious on what his suggestion is.
I'm Read More Book, and this video is attempting to address some of the problems that I see with the current implementation of the Infinite Atlas in Path of Exile 2. I know GGG are working on a large endgame update, and with around a month to go, I don't envisage this feedback to have any impact on their work, but I've been thinking a lot about it, so I wanted to share my outline of the problems that I see and a potential solution. As GGG always says, players are good at pointing out problems and not necessarily solutions, but I think it's still helpful to offer some constructive ideas. I'm only going to cover the implementation of the Atlas system itself and progression through the endgame. I won't be covering the Atlas tree, tablets and juicing, or the endgame content inside the maps themselves. This feedback is based on what I think would be fun for me in the endgame. I just want a system that's fun to interact with and keeps me interested. If you agree or disagree, then I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And do just remember, be kind, it's just a game. There'll be 3 more videos in this series exploring a few topics that matter to me. First, there'll be a defenses video, then a crossbow video, and then finally, I'll wrap everything up with a summary video incorporating any of your feedback that stands out, as well as a list of quality of life items that I still see as outstanding. I'll start by saying that I like the concept of the Infinite Atlas and having a world to explore. It's far more appealing to me than simply putting maps into a menu system and running them for drops.
Agreed.
GGG's solution may be to scrap the Infinite Atlas, which I think would be a shame, but my ideas here are focused on how we can improve the endgame system as it exists today if they don't do something completely different. A too long didn't watch of my issues is as follows. Direction and distance need to matter more and be clearly signposted. Interesting nodes on the atlas are too far apart and take too much time to reach. Progression needs to feel more meaningful, impactful, and continuous. Saving content for later and backtracking at the very least shouldn't feel necessary, and at best shouldn't feel like a valid option.
True.
Information presented by the atlas should be easy to pass without feeling overwhelming or exhausting.
These are all absolutely fantastic points so far, by the way. He's very clearly highlighting a lot of the necessary issues that have to be tackled. Like just think about just towers, for instance. Direction and distance needs to matter more and be clearly signposted. So this was an issue that towers basically showcased easily, which is that how much distance you had to cover to find the correct towers made the amount of distance you were going like not really feel as relevant. Basically, you had to put too much. So this is easy to see here. Same thing with saving content for later backtracking shouldn't feel necessary. This was another problem that towers had as well. So it's like you can kind of feel, just as an example of something they had to remove, because these are actually primary issues, these two right here are absolutely fantastic points. So far I'm 100% in agreement. What up, Ghazi? Thanks for the raid, sir. Good to see you. We're watching the video by Read More Book. So far, we're only like a minute into it. So far it's pretty good. He's talking about his issues with the Infinite Atlas. It's so far pretty strong points being made, but we're going to see how he goes.
You'll find the timestamps below, and I'll include a copy of the transcript and the associated images in a document in the description as well. First, I'm going to dive deeper into each of these issues, grouped into 3 themes: exploration, progression, and information. We'll take a look at what we can learn from existing systems in Path of Exile 1, and then we'll finally present a possible solution that I think would be fun to explore. First, let's talk about exploration. The direction you choose should matter, and you should be rewarded for how far you've traveled. The first problem appears when you first open the atlas. Direction doesn't matter. There's no distinction between going north, east, south, or west. Distance matters, but it's very poorly signposted. Combine these 2 issues and you have an aimless and frustrating experience. You're given some direction, in the sense that you are tasked with finding corrupted zones to clear to earn atlas passive points, as well as some goals around clearing unique maps and fighting an anomaly boss, defeating Citadel bosses, and then eventually fighting the Arbiter of Ash to unlock rare tablets for better juicing. When you begin, you can see at least one corrupted zone, and you're told to go to it, but then there's nothing telling you to not then go back to the center and go in another direction, which would be a mistake. This creates the issue where you can end up not finding any of the other interesting areas for a long time, because signposting is so poor. The balance between linearity and exploration is just not there. There's too much freedom and it's dizzying. Constraints are important. Too much choice and agency is an issue. Complete freedom in a system like this is something that should be worked towards through a well signposted process that imparts the right knowledge to the player so that they don't get overwhelmed. Let's take a look at the other 2 mapping systems in Path of Exile, the PoE1 Atlas and Delve. In both of these systems, direction and distance matter, and it's signposted better than it is in PoE2. In the PoE1 Atlas, direction determines the content that becomes available. Each corner of the atlas holds a different content type, whether that's Exarcanita, the memory threads, Shaper or Elder, and Maven. And distance determines the tier of map that's required to access that content.
I wonder if he's going to go down a point which is like the biome should be sectioned off. Because when I see this in his points being made, it almost sounds like the biome should be sectioned off, where this is a desert way, this is a woods way, this is a mountain way, this is like a swamp and water way. And each of the different ways you go would have a boss associated with each.
Oh!
What if this, the citadels are biome based, so you could like, okay, well I need to go this way to get this citadel, this way to go that citadel, etc. But they had that with more pinnacle bosses, etc. Can we please remove the biomes? I don't know if I like biomes either. I'm going to be honest. I think biomes are a little bit limiting. In terms of being like, okay, so my issue with the biomes is this: it's the same thing as towers, I think, which is like if you have one biome that's better than the others, you're going to run into like local knowledge with swamp and water biomes. You're going to run into a circumstance where you kind of only try the min-max and juice like just certain types of ones, which means you're going, if you don't have a system where separate the biomes, That means then you're having to go through certain things to get to other maps that are actually runnable. The concept of running dead maps to get to a map that's not a dead map is just a bad concept. So I don't know if I necessarily I like biomes in theory. I don't know if I like them in practice. It sounds like a good thing, but biomes, if we put emphasis on biomes, it could very quickly mean that you're running bad biomes to get to good biomes with the current implementation of the Infinite Atlas. That's why I get kind of weird when people start talking about like, oh, well, they should make biomes more important. It's like you could make biomes more important, but that means if only one of the biomes is very important, then you're going to have to run a bunch of really dog shit ones to get to the biome that matters. And I don't know if I like that.
The difference here is that exploration is minimal. You're effectively filling up a menu that is bound at each side. You can wander around in concentric circles, completing each tier before moving on to the next if you so wish. Or you can beeline for a corner. Those are your two choices. A strong build will want to get to T16s ASAP, and a weaker build may want to fill the atlas by tier more slowly.
Sure.
However, the map is static, and once you have filled it up, you're just left with a menu system that has quite a poor user experience. The PoE1 Atlas is actually quite linear. The aim is to fill it as fast as possible and then focus on the activities that you want to do. It gives the illusion of exploration, but there is none really. So I don't think this particular implementation is a good fit for what the PoE2 endgame system can be. I actually think they've repeated the aimlessness issue with the latest iteration of the PoE1 Atlas. You can end up not gaining access to key events like completing your void stones at the right time when they become available because you've gone in the wrong direction. It took me a while to realize that I needed to be making a beeline to the southwest corner of the Atlas so that I could do the Exarch and Nita questlines, followed by the northwest corner for the Incarnation bosses, the northeast corner for Shaper and Elder, and the southeast corner for Maven. The best thing here would be to ignore most of the maps along the way and fill them out later after you've got your void stones. This is somewhat mitigated by the fact that the Atlas is bound. You'll get there eventually as long as you're completing new maps, and you'll want to do all of them anyway to get your bonus. PoE2 does not have the boundaries that mitigate its issues with aimless wandering. Next we have Delve, which clearly signposts that distance and direction matters. Up makes it easier, left and right maintains difficulty, down makes it harder. Exploration is encouraged. Different biomes have different rewards, and there are unique events that can spawn in each of them. The further you travel down, the higher the density of these special events. The Delve system encourages traveling down as far as is comfortable and then exploring left or right looking for rewarding nodes. Moving from node to node in Delve is also very quick and quite low friction. If I see something interesting I want to travel to, it doesn't take a long time to get there. That's for the most part. There are sometimes awkward routes due to the procedural generation aspect that means you can get blocked off at multiple avenues. Delve is unbound, but there is no ultimate goal or endpoint and nothing to unlock. Aimless wandering at the upper level is less rewarding than at deeper levels, but it doesn't lock you out of anything really, aside from the opportunity cost and using up precious sulfite, which is harder to gather in great quantities early on in mapping. The directional aspect of Delve is one of the things that I think that we can take from it to improve the PoE2 Atlas. Exploration on the PoE2 Atlas is very time consuming. If you see a location that you want to travel to, it takes a lot of gameplay to get there, especially if you have to travel through maps that have poor layouts or a route.
I agree. The travel time is more than is necessary. I still believe that you could significantly improve this without having to do too much tweaking by basically making the Gram project, which if you don't know what that is, that means when it's a rare tablet, unique tablet, when you run a tower, you can put it in and it will make it where you can teleport to anywhere within range of the tower. This should be cooked into towers themselves. Currently, towers just offer vision. Doesn't really matter that much. Towers used to be more important. I don't understand why the Grand Project reward style of the tower is not cooked into the tower. It would be awesome to actually just go to a tower and get the ability to like zip line to any of the other points. It's too tedious, and I don't really see why we have to be punished for not, like if we want to go here, why do we need the punishment of running 5 maps to be able to run the Citadel? Like, we already found the Citadel. That means we've been playing the game. Like, just let me go to the Citadel. Me being able to do the Citadel and defeat the boss in and of itself is the requirement. Plus, you have to be able to run a tier 16 anyway to be able to do it. I don't see the reason as why I have to run these maps to get there as well. So, If they want to be able to make it where this is just part of progression, sure, but like be able to have the tower be up. If I hit a tower, like a tower's here, it can teleport me to any of these points for free. They already have it in the game with the Grand Project. So it's an economic value proposal at that point. Like they already think the mechanic itself is fine enough to be something that you could like purchase and acquire. I don't think it's something that requires an economic tax of me having to buy the item to make it worth. I think it should be worth the tax of actually just finding the tower on the map itself. So that would be at least somewhat of a quality of life. It's not a permanent solution to the Infinite Atlas, but I think it would go a long way to make the Infinite Atlas feel significantly better.
Route around the long way because there's no connection. There's enough RNG already without the added friction of being cut off on the Atlas. The number of nodes required to reach places needs to be reduced, and pathing to somewhere interesting needs to always be straightforward. It's currently too time consuming to get to an interesting activity. I've heard some feedback that the solution to this particular problem is to build Grand Project into the towers, which allows you to jump to any node.
Okay, well, yeah, I've been saying this for quite a while, so looks like he's got a counter in my point.
The radius of the tower without needing to path to it. But this is not the solution.
Okay,
this
why
just
not?
demonstrates the issue that there are too many nodes to travel through. If the Grand Project can become core functionality, then the Atlas can simply be made tighter. It's clear that anomaly, corruption, and citadel hopping is the preferred way of interacting with the Atlas, so make those things easier to get to by default. To summarize,
Yeah, I agree. It's a quality of life. It makes it feel better, but it's not. You are band-aiding the symptom, not like the actual disease. Like I understand this point, which is fair. I do think if they're not going to fix the Infinite Atlas, you have to do it anyway. Period. Like you should be able to do the Grand Project cooked in the. There's no reason not to have it implemented in its current state. If we're not going to fundamentally change it, then you should add this.
to improve exploration, we need to make directions and distance matter, and we need to reduce the number of jumps between interesting activities. I prefer the more exploration-focused gameplay, doing the league mechanic I want to while pushing as far as I can go for a sense of progression. And on that note, let's look at progression next. The feeling of making progress in a game is very important. The way this is currently managed in PoE 2 is through pinnacle content accessed with fragments found in normal maps for league mechanics and in special citadels for the Arbiter of Ash. The chance of these citadels spawning is dictated by the straight line distance you have travelled from the centre and not from the number of nodes that you have completed. Because direction does not matter, this creates the issue of players spending time going in circles, never finding the citadels for possibly hundreds of maps. Corrupted zones.
My understanding is it's not the further you're out, the more common they are, but that you just have to be a certain distance away before they do spawn, is my understanding, and it's still, like, random. So I don't believe, from what I understand about the mechanic and what I've heard, is that, and in my own experience, is that if I go 1,000 blocks away, that it spawns at X rate, but if I go 2,000 blocks away, it spawns twice as much. So it's from what I remember from the interviews, they said it doesn't spawn within a certain distance, and now when they made them more common, but also when it spawns the other ones relatively in proximity. If this was true, if you spent the whole league just going one way, you would eventually get to a point where they cluster so commonly you would just have citadels all over the time, and you could farm a bajillion of these things. It is still RNG. We learned this since the corpse thing. It's still RNG of citadels being spawned after a certain point away from the nexus.
Are required to get Atlas points and can also be hard to find and often poorly signposted if you don't have one immediately visible on your map. The other aspect of progression is the map tiering system. Higher tier maps have higher level monsters, drop higher tiers of currency, have access to more uniques, and higher quantities of pinnacle fragments. Certain tiers of waystones are required to access unique maps, anomalies, citadels, or receive Atlas tree skill points from corrupted nexuses. Beyond the tier number itself, you then also have a number of modifiers on a map which grants greater challenges and rewards. This means that currently all progression is tied to the items and has very little to do with the Atlas itself. There is currently no direct link between the distance travelled and progression in normal maps. Everything is the same no matter how far you travel. The same modifier pools in special zones, the same anomalies. This is the main issue I see here, and I think it needs to be improved by creating a sense of continuous progression the further you travel. It doesn't need to scale difficulty in the same way as Delve, but I think we can take a page from the main PoE 1 Atlas here. The PoE 1 Atlas progression system is based on running maps of the relevant tier in combination with them being either magic, rare or corrupted to get the bonus for completion. While it does give a clear checklist of activities, it's somewhat laborious and arbitrary and not really that interesting. I don't want the Atlas completion system in PoE 2 to be the same checkbox menu system that exists in PoE 1, but I think we can take two things from this. The distance from the start increases the required tier to access the map, and defeating each Voidstone boss changes the Atlas.
Okay, we gotta be careful with this in PoE 2, because if we think that we should basically gate content like they did with the Citadels by distance from where you spawn, you can run into a situation where we're basically gatekeeping like a pretty large. I mean, this is kind of doubling down on what people already don't like about it, which is you have to play like a certain amount of maps to get to certain things. It works a little bit more in PoE 1 because if you look at the amount of maps you're running like not even a dozen maps to get to the end. So I think you have to be very careful with this.
What makes Delve more fun to me than the Infinite Atlas is the reward for moving continuously forward or down. You don't feel bad for leaving nodes behind because you know that going deeper is more rewarding. The PoE 2 Atlas doesn't have this. Fully clearing a cleansed area on the way through the tiers feels like a waste if you do them before you have access to the maximum juice, given that they're a multiplier of what you put in. You end up with so many areas that are hard to pass that you need to backtrack over once you've completed your progression. I think the key for meaningful progression is that it should not be worth returning to the area closer to your starting point. That is what we should take from Delve. Do a detour for a chance at a good item from an anomaly, but the base maps get more rewarding and difficult the further you travel. The corrupted zones that provide Atlas tree progression should be clearly signposted and also lead you towards the final goal of defeating the Arbiter. To summarize, progression needs to be impactful, meaningful, and continuous.
I personally would argue against continuous. The problem with that is then if we continue the reward, let's just say like rarity or quantity or some kind of progression reward for continuing to push outwards, then we are effectively making Last Epoch's corruption system, we're effectively making like the tempo that we just had. Continuing to ramp as you go out is basically making an infinitely scaling in-game. I actually absolutely hate like infinite scaling. I think it's a dog shit mechanic in ARPGs. I don't find Greater Rifts to be a type of in-game that I would want to experience significantly, and I don't enjoy the corruption system in Last Epoch, and I don't find going from wave 105 to wave 106 as interesting as beating a static boss that everyone has had the same experience fighting and is familiar with it. So for me, the concept of distance needs to be more rewarding. I can totally concur with. The concept of we should continually add, he keeps going back to Delve here, which is more infinite scaling. For the base core in-game, I absolutely do not want continuous scaling progression. The PoE 1 Atlas doesn't have this either. It goes, to use the PoE 1 Atlas example, you get to an endpoint. It does not, if it's an infinite scaling Atlas, you cannot have continual progression as you scale outwards. I think that would be a horrible mistake.
Finally, we have the theme of information, and I think this is possibly the biggest issue the Infinite Atlas currently has. The sheer overload of information that is presented as you are scrolling across your Atlas, and it's information that is poorly presented. 3D isometric layout of the PoE 2 Atlas looks cool, but it adds to some of the issues with navigation and information fatigue. I would make biomes much more distinct. It's hard to tell at a glance what's a forest, what's grass, what's desert when you're scrolling around.
That's fair, yeah.
Do you know which maps can roll in which biome? So if you prefer a layout where you need to go? And there's other questions, like what modifiers does this corrupted or cleansed node have? Which map do I run next to unlock the anomaly? That's true as well. It's a poor user experience and it gets worse the more you interact with it.
I agree.
How many maps will an engaged player realistically run in a league? And how does that compare with how many map nodes they will see in total on the Atlas? There's a certain amount of fatigue that builds up when you need to discount information that's being fed to you. Scrolling an Atlas full of nodes you never need or want to do is not a good experience.
I agree.
We need to tighten the travel experience up a lot. Another issue with the way that exploration is handled is is that certain farming strategies will soft brick your atlas. If you want to anomaly or citadel hunt, you very quickly create an enormous atlas with hundreds of nodes, and if you want to farm all the corrupted and cleanse zones that you travel past, you're having to pass way too many nodes and you'll lose yourself constantly. This is another example of Grand Project making things worse, not better. Grand Project becoming a part of tower functionality does not address the atlas sprawl issue, it just makes it worse. It helps you find interesting nodes.
It doesn't make it worse, brother. It doesn't solve the core issue, I agree, but being able to have more quality of life in terms of being able to actually access which map node you want to get to and travel across the map does. It makes it where you don't have to do as many mediocre maps in between. It's not gonna actively make the atlas worse because you don't have to do the maps in between. It's the same thing in terms of like how annoying the map is. I agree, but it's not. Being able to go from here to here doesn't make these like 7 nodes. Like, oh, I wish I had played these 7 nodes. Like it's
quicker,
not.
but then it leaves you with a giant map that you have to navigate to find anything. I think corruption and cleanse is a good idea. I like it, but it just leaves me with the question: is what is the point of having so many nodes in between? A couple of travel nodes at most would be plenty. If the bonuses are too powerful, then scale them back when you're closer to origin and increase them as you get further away. Remove the travel nodes and improve the progression experience.
Let's do
Even if
Flicker
you don't
Strike.
Grand Project hop. The issue with corrupted and cleansed zones is because they are somewhat rare, you don't want to waste your very good mods on lower tiers and less rewarding maps, because the bonuses from the zones are a multiplier. So the tendency to save the good ones while you level up your atlas tree and capability to do juiced T15 and T16s is encouraged, adding to the information overload of having to go back and either jump to your limited bookmarks or manually scroll through the atlas and look for good nodes to run. In this scenario, a search function would make things easier, but I think that would be a band-aid over the problem and does not address the core issue. Once you reach a certain point, it shouldn't be the better choice to go back to a zone closer to origin and run.
Man, it feels like this guy will listen to some of the feedback I said and just wants to disagree with every point I ever said. Like, it's like, what's the problem with having a search function? Do we not all want a search function? Why are we arguing against quality of life? Like, we have to have a search function, even if we implement every single change you're mentioning, brother. Like, we have to have a search function. Like, I don't understand why are we spending time arguing against this? Like, yeah, it's absolutely a band-aid, but you're fucking bleeding. Like, I don't it doesn't, just because we're not talking about reworking the entire thing doesn't mean we shouldn't do it.
Previously uncovered zones. Fog of War is meant to help with info overload, but I think it only does so much, and in some cases it can make things worse, especially when it conceals the path that you need to take to get to an anomaly or a citadel. Suddenly, you can find yourself cut off, and you've wasted a bunch of time and maps hitting a dead end. You should always know that you'll be able to reach a destination that you can see to progress further.
Yep.
This
agreed.
is something that Delve struggles with as well. You can get cut off from going deeper repeatedly and have to backtrack just to make progress. Something that Delve does very well, however, is the simplicity of the information that it conveys. It's very easy to see at a glance what each node is, as they have distinct visual styles. I spend a lot of time hovering over nodes on the PoE 2 Atlas to see what mods they have, and then realizing I left it alone because it was a mod I didn't care about.
Agreed, yeah.
PoE
agreed.
2 has some good information communication. You know what type of anomaly you're dealing with, you know which citadel
Stun.
you're dealing with
Yeah, what's up, sis?
by the colored beam, and you know whether a
Corrupted.
zone is corrupted or cleansed.
Oh,
Everything else
let's go
requires
back.
hovering over. It's also very hard to tell how far you are from the center without scrolling back there and then physically navigating back to the point you were at and
Yeah.
counting the screens.
Agreed again.
That's if you're even aware that distance is important. Again, I don't think switching to the PoE 1 Atlas is a good solution. It has very poor information communication. Once it's full, you either need to know the name of the map you want to run or remember where it is. The significance of each quadrant is also poorly communicated for both the purposes of Encane content locations at the corners and for things like memory vault rewards from astrolabes. Scrying can actually help a lot in the endgame because it puts a helpful purple ring around the map you've chosen to scry from and to. So those are the main problems I see with the PoE 2 Infinite Atlas.
Free
So now
shot.
let's look.
I agree
Lead.
with basically all of these. There's
done.
some suggestions I'm not sure if I necessarily like as much so far, but like I'm
Night.
pretty much on the same page as him so far. So far, it's been quite a good video.
At a possible solution. My proposed solution attempts to retain the infinite exploration component while addressing the major issues that I've highlighted in this video.
Alright, let's
To
see.
summarize, I would like to see biome-based traversal to drastically reduce the number of hops.
Harm soundboard.
I would like agency within a biome to run whatever layout I want, with bonuses for running different layouts. I want clear signposting.
Agreed. Except I don't. The bonuses for running different layout, stuff like this worries me a little bit, because if the optimal strategy for whatever, like local knowledge does this right now. If it's like, hey, you're in a swamp, you get more currency. I actually don't like that because it forces you into a map layout you don't like. Farming for the best farm shouldn't be locked behind a certain layout that you want, and the layout should matter for the build you're doing. Like if you're doing Sparkuan corridors, for instance, or something like that's okay, but certain bonuses, like what if one biome just has like more quantity, right? Then we end up with a swamp grass situation, which you're always running those even if you hate those maps, and kind of having like an optimo map layout for an objective more currency thing I kind of don't like. That aside, like agency within biome, run whatever layout you want, yeah. Like more player agency, 100% on board.
For the direction that a player should be traveling to reach the next endgame objective. I would like at-a-glance information for each node with a strong visual identity.
It's a fantastic point. I again agree with, like having to hover over each one of the nodes. I guess part of this would be reduced by having less nodes, but having to hover over each of these nodes to see the quantity, the rarity, if it has, you know, the fury in it, all of these others, then having to mark it and pin is hyper annoying. I agree again.
I would like a tiering system that provides an atlas reset to prevent further overload of information and clearer progression. Each tier
Okay, let's see. A tiering system that provides an atlas reset to prevent further overload information, clearer progression. Each tier provides a greater density of interesting events in the biome with a final infinite tier that uses towers to highlight special locations. If the infinite tier is like the infinite atlas, in which it's infinitely scrolling but not infinitely scalable, I'm okay with it. I would be very firmly against infinitely scaling content.
tier could provide a greater density of interesting events in the biomes, with a final infinite tier that uses towers to highlight special locations. I want progression that ensures it's rewarding to do the events, such as corruptions, anomalies, and anything else as
Sure.
you pass through, with a strong incentive to not save content and backtrack to it later.
Sure, yeah.
I apologize for the MS Paint style drawing, but hopefully it's clear what I'm trying to convey here.
You want
Oh, it's
Nico?
We need to make direction and distance matter and clearly signpost that.
Nico,
This can
Nico,
be
Nico.
achieved by only allowing one guided direction at the start, and then once that destination is reached, you can either keep going further to increase difficulty, or go left and right to maintain the difficulty. The goal of the Citadel for the Atlas tier you're in is clearly signposted. Completing it triggers a realm shift that opens a new Atlas area that starts the process again, and has more unique events that can spawn, like anomalies. This means you can keep an infinite atlas for each tier, but also give meaningful steps of progression. Citadels can spawn at set
It sounds, I'm not gonna lie, it sounds like monoliths a little bit.
distances from the origin for the first 3 tiers, as an area transition boss that gets you a fragment that you put into your atlas device. This shifts the atlas to the next tier and increases the difficulty and reward scaling. Then, in the third realm, once you've defeated the Arbiter for the first time, you get access to the final atlas area. This does not have a boundary and introduces towers that signal nearby unique events that aren't yet revealed. You can now also find citadels as part of normal exploration. Anomalies already have tier requirements.
I feel like going from point A to point B and then resetting and go point A to point B again is kind of like literally already the Infinite Atlas, just this time with difficulty added to it. I agree with his diagnosis of the issues of it. I don't know if I like this implementation so far, but let's hear the rest of that.
So build them into this. After the first citadel, tier 1 anomalies start spawning and so on. You can maintain player agency in this system by always allowing them to travel left or right infinitely. So if they want to farm any tier of Atlas before the Arbiter, they can
Sure,
as much as
yeah.
they like. but it should always be the best choice to push to the final tier as soon as your build can manage it. For progression, I would also remove the tendency to leave a cleanse zone to come back to once you've got your Nexus points. You can
I agree with. I don't like the cleanse points saving for later either. I'm 100% on board with them there too.
do this by ensuring it's both easy to run and worth running as you pass through it on your way up the tiers. The only reason to return to an earlier area in progression should be because you have a new character or build that's currently at a lower power level. One of the good things about existing anomalies is they're rewarding to run at any difficulty, from the moment you can access them. You don't need to save them until you come back with a 6 mod T15 or 16. This system drastically reduces the amount of nodes on the Atlas and the amount of information presented to the player. For each biome node, you may need to complete a certain number of maps to move on. For simple nodes, it can be 1 or 2, and for anomalies, it could be 3 plus the anomaly map itself. You can always have a choice to run the same layout repeatedly in a biome to meet the objective, but you could have bonuses for running different layouts if you want to encourage that. You'll quickly see in early access which map people gravitate towards. Knowing you'll be able to access an anomaly in a node is better than running maps around it hoping it unlocks. Not to mention the pain of chasing Mansion in the Mist's wisps across already completed nodes. For special nodes, you should be able to see your progress on them from the Atlas screen at a glance, as well as a clear visual identity of the biome type and any special events that it contains. Bonuses should also be clearly communicated, whether they be specific corrupted or cleansed modifiers for that biome, or any distance-based bonuses in the final Atlas zone. The player can be given a choice when finishing a corrupted biome as to whether they want to attempt to cleanse the zone or not. If the player fails, then they have another connected zone to attempt it. This gives more leniency than we currently have, where if you fail a nexus, you're completely locked out of cleansing until the next zone. Pathing should always be possible for adjacent nodes. You should know exactly how many jumps and maps it's going to take to reach your next goal.
So finding points I agree with here is I agree with the fact that you multiple attempts on the nexus would be kind of nice. If you fuck up or lag out or something bad happens, like, yeah, sure. Agreed there. Always being able to go to an adjacent node would be nice as well, because the pathing is actually like typically quite bad. So I agree with these points also.
You can maintain the bookmark system, but with this system the number of nodes is drastically reduced and backtracking is discouraged, so it shouldn't be needed. But if you do want to save anomalies and corruptions, then you can, of course. It's also not something that I would necessarily need, but you could also introduce terraforming orbs. They could change a biome if there's no layouts that you like from the one that you're in. They may add too much busy work though if people end up only wanting to run one layout because it's the best. Tablets should be applied at the biome level.
He touches on the issue I have with like the biome portion of the layout.
Add their bonuses and league content to the maps within it. I think these should be simplified, but that's not part of this video. The less mods you need to pass, the better. Knowing all the maps in a biome have the same mods makes this much easier. In conclusion, direction and distance need to matter more and be clearly signposted. Interesting nodes on the Atlas are too far apart and take too much time to reach. Progression needs to feel more meaningful, impactful, and continuous. Saving content for later and backtracking shouldn't feel necessary. The information presented by the Atlas should be easy to pass without feeling overwhelming or exhausting. So those are my ideas, and whether this would actually improve the experience isn't certain. We'd only know by playing it for an extended period of time. If you made it this far, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'd love to hear your thoughts below. And if you want to see more, then I'd appreciate a like and subscribe.
I give him a subscribe.
I have 3 more videos coming in this feedback series.
Here you go, guys.
One on defenses, one on crossbows, and a final summary video that will include outstanding quality of life features as well. If you want to come out and hang out and chat with me on my stream, I stream Sundays, 2 PM to 8 PM UK time, and Mondays and Tuesdays, 8 PM till 11 PM UK time. I'll be on Twitch and YouTube. Thanks for watching. Bye!
And I'll do a shout out to his Twitch as well if you follow him on Twitch. That was a good video. I quite enjoyed that one. I agree with his diagnosis that he had here in the beginning as well as the end. A couple of the his solution things. I mean, to be fair, I think the PoE2 Atlas is in a situation where it is I think extraordinarily difficult to fix, and I don't have any better solutions than the man is suggesting either. To be perfectly clear, I don't know if I necessarily think those are like the absolute solutions that should be done. It's a little too close to monoliths. It's a little bit still too repetitive for me. Probably needs some still cooking, but I
could have been
divine orbs. Where like the problems arise and how people lose interest or feel like it takes too much time. Like I'm with
all right
on that.
I slowly die in this character.
You will
This
fight
makes
like
it
a
clear to
decaf.
me that
Shit.
actually fixing the Infinite Atlas is going to be exceptionally difficult to the point, because I'm thinking of 0.5. I don't think they're going to rework the Infinite Atlas entirely.
I can't do this just yet.
I think it's a significant rework if they do. I would bet they are more akin to throwing on band-aids so that it's playable. That's what I would think. They're going to add quality of life, maybe shrink it down, make the it's easier to, before they actually like rework it in its entirety. Probably add more content onto it. Like, I think they'll keep throwing more content onto it until you feel like you don't need to progress as far because you have stuff to do. I think there'll be mini band-aids thrown onto this wound. I don't know. Isn't now the time to actually fix it? Yeah, I'm not saying in theoretically it shouldn't be reworked. I'm saying realistically, do I actually think it will be? And I doubt it because of the scale of the issue. Like, it effectively, to change the fundamentals of what it is, they need an entirely different and new endgame.
Greetings. Journey
You need way
well.
too much special content to make it work, but I think that's what they'll do. They already knew what they wanted to do with it. They just rushed it in in-game. They were after the issues with D4. All I'm saying is with the amount of time that it takes them currently to produce the content, the amount that they've been behind before in the past, and the amount that's still needed into the game if they're going to make 1.0 full release by the December that everyone thinks they're going to do, I do not believe they're going to do a complete overhaul of the in-game. I think the in-game rework and etc. they're talking about will have changes, but not like completely removing the Infinite Atlas and having a totally different system, which is basically what most people think they're going to be doing, which I've been hearing all the time. I don't think they have the time to do this. People effectively want an entirely different in-game, and it's not like they haven't been adding content, so they have to do an entirely different in-game, and it's not just like removing towers, and then they have to figure out where all of the content they're both adding is, and all of the content that's already game, where that's going to go. They have to redevelop like half the game at this point. I don't think they're going to do that. I think they have to. They can't keep band-aiding everything. I think the Infinite Atlas is like fundamentally has some issues as well, and they're going to have to do a large-scale rework at some point. I think it's going to get delayed until the point that it won't happen for a while, until like an expansion season or something well after the game is launched. They're going to keep throwing stuff in it until it's interesting enough to keep people around during the leagues. I think that's what's going to happen. And they're going to try to have league mechanics like Alva and shit to like keep people interested in the game. But have enough to have enough hours in the game. But I don't think the Infinite Atlas is going to stay this is it. It's like everyone wants the Infinite Atlas game. I don't think we're going to get that before December. It's a failing solution. I literally don't think they have the time. I actually just don't think they have the time. How are they going to rework
survive.
the entirety of the in-game
The storm approaches.
between now and December? Like, I don't see it. If they manage to do it, I'll be impressed. I'll be impressed, but I will also be surprised.
Lightning gives little warning.
Well, you all asked for it, so here we go. Hey, I'm Miles Sweet. To start off this video, I just wanted to thank all of you for your huge support on my last video. I never could have imagined that within only 3 videos, I'd have reached 3,000 subscribers.
Thunder
I only hope
and
I can keep up the
lightning
quality level
about.
of these guides going forward, and can continue to be a reliable resource for all of you in the community. Now, hopping right into things, let's begin talking about why all of you are here. Crafting. The infamous, unachievable mechanic
Fire
spoken of
seeks
in the
what it
darkest
will.
libraries of the Path of Exile communities. So mystical, so confusing, so deep.
Mortal minds can begin to fathom its nuances.
Or rather, that's what you've been led to believe.
Vengeance
In
is
actuality,
cold
crafting in Path of
indeed.
Exile 2 is actually not that difficult. And like all of my videos before, I hope I can shed some light on this intimidating system to help you all see how simple and approachable it really can be. To begin, I want to clarify, like I have with all of my other videos, that this is a beginner's guide to crafting. What that means is I am approaching it under the context that not only have you not crafted before
The
in Path of
flames
Exile 2,
race
you
towards
might
you.
not even know how it works or what items are used for it. Because of that, we'll be covering a lot of basics, like simple currency items, what prefixes and suffixes are, and working our way up to the more complicated mechanics.
Death's cold grip is inescapable.
Calendarification of PoE. All right, so let's figure out what's going on with
Picture
this.
this. You wake up one day in 2026 ready to play your favorite game, Path of Exile. You go straight to YouTube and type fub gun juicing.
While Marathon isn't going to shut down tomorrow, I don't think it's going to be
Hate,
around as
hate.
long as Sony anticipated. This is not a game that's going to be able to survive 3 or 4 or 5 years until their next big hit releases. We know that the media is coping over the fact that it's not doing insane numbers, and they're saying, oh, team morale remains good, even though I don't know how that would be the case. But now we're also while Marathon isn't going to desperate, that they are actually trying to come up with ways to get more people into the end game raids because there's
Flames
not enough
beget more
playing it.
flames.
Marathon is testing out a new experimental game mode which forces players to use free sponsored kits, and really all of this looks like desperation. I have a few different things to show off, but before I get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, join the community in my live streams, and consider supporting through Patreon or YouTube memberships. Now, anytime I talk about Marathon, I start off my videos by saying it's perfectly fine. If you like this game, it's perfectly fine. If you love this experience and you and your friends are having a great time, I'm glad you feel like you are getting your money's worth out of this experience. But it's very clear that this game is not doing what Sony anticipated. They bought Bungie for
You
$3.6
must
billion
be a
and
glutton
didn't
for
think that they weren't
punishment.
even going to be able to top 100,000 players concurrent in the Steam version. Never mind on console, where apparently it's not doing as good because we've heard Steam is its primary platform. But we are now seeing a lot of desperate moves
Impressive,
happening,
Challenger.
not just by Bungie, but also fans. So this article is the one we're going to start with. It says Marathon is facing a red alert for its long-term service as it records lackluster performance metrics despite a development budget of, as we know, $250 million USD, it's rumored, as the live service titles backed by astronomical capital such as Sony Interactive Entertainment's Concord and Wildlight Entertainment's Highguard shut down one after another. Marathon is also seeing a steep decline in its user base. According to a Forbes report on the 9th, the initial development budget exceeded $250 million, excluding server maintenance and new content production costs. Market analyst firm Alina estimated that the game had sold 1.2 million units across all platforms. The article talks about how industry insiders pointed out that management relied too heavily on the belief that they could replicate the lucky break of Apex Legends with games like Highguard and Concord and now Marathon, which succeeded through a surprise launch without significant marketing. Wildlight stated on its official social media that the reason for the service termination was its inability to build a player base that could sustain the game for the long term. Experts identify long development cycles and market saturation as the core reasons for the string of failures among blockbusters backed by hundreds of billions of won, or the equivalent of hundreds of millions of USD, during projected periods that average 5 to 7 years. User preferences shift rapidly. In a market where established games have already solidified the ecosystem, it is difficult to survive with complacent planning and standardized monetization models alone. Now, though, we have the situation becoming much more complicated because it's not just Bungie, right, that is facing a problem. It's not just Sony that's facing a problem. It is the industry in general that has to go through a massive content shift. People are leaning more towards smaller indie and AA games that have smaller teams of passionate people that are focused on
Fuck, you're annoying.
All right, Blaze wanted me to watch this video. The state of PoE 2 after 1 year, an early access retrospective. This is BlazeWorks here. All right, Blaze, let's watch it.
After the initial reveal at ExileCon 2019 and the much more detailed re-reveal at ExileCon 2023, the community witnessed an evolution in the Path of Exile and ARPG genre as a whole. Slower, weightier combat, next-generation graphics, brutal bosses, and a completely new direction for the franchise. Then, on December 6, 2024, Early Access launched, and the real experience began. 4 major patches later, we've seen the hype, backlash, controversy, course correction, and the community trying to figure out what Path of Exile 2 actually wants to be. In this video, I'll be breaking down PoE 2's entire Early Access journey thus far. I've reviewed every keynote presentation, patch note, along with many videos, articles, and posts to provide you with the big picture on a patch-by-patch basis.
All right, Blaze.
We'll be taking a look at what's changed, what's worked, and what didn't. And most importantly, highlighting the entire Path of Exile 2 Early Access journey to see where the game stands today. So lock in, Exiles, because we have a full inventory to unpack. Today, we are taking a deep dive into Path of Exile 2's 1-year Early Access journey and beyond. Enjoy the video. To understand where Path of Exile 2 stands today, we first have to travel back in time to when the hype began. It all started on November 15th, 2019 at ExileCon in Auckland, New Zealand. Chris Wilson, Eric Olofsson, and Jonathan Rogers walk on stage to announce and present Path of Exile 2. Not as a sequel in the traditional sense, but a massive evolution to the original game.
And we're really proud to finally reveal Path of Exile 4.0.
4.0.
When we finished developing 3.0, we knew that we couldn't extend Path of Exile's campaign forever. Adding more acts would make the game just too long before players got to maps. At the same time, we knew we really needed to bring the quality of Path of Exile's campaign up to a 2019 standard. We realized that we needed to make a new campaign. For years now, we've been wanting to make a sequel to Path of Exile. The problem with that, though, is that sequels split a community between 2 products. It's also hard for a sequel
Yeah, I can see the face creeping. That kind of, I mean...
to compete with the amount of content and features that the original game has. We've just spent 6 years making expansions for Path of Exile, so imagine if we released a Path of Exile 2 and it was just a bare campaign with none of that extra content. This would be a sad shell of an action RPG compared to the current state of Path of Exile. It'd have none of the years of expansion content and improvements that make the game great.
In 2019, Path of Exile 2 was presented originally as a 4.0 update for Path of Exile 1. It was a brand new campaign, which could be played in addition to the original Path of Exile 1 campaign. It featured new Ascendancy classes, a new skill gem and socket gem system, improved graphics, rigging and animations, and shapeshifting, all while having the multitude of systems, features, and mechanics that
Holy moly, dude. Betrayal, Dev, Incursion, Synthesis, Blight, Bestiary. Okay.
have been added to Path of Exile over the entire course of its development. Oh, And they also announced Path of Exile Mobile.
Hell yeah, dude. Where's my PoE Mobile, bro? I'd be fucking great at that game, dude.
Let's just say around a year ago it became real difficult to announce that.
Now, fast forward 4 years later at ExileCon 2023, and this is when things really start to shape up for the game. This time, Jonathan Rogers and Mark Williams take to the stage and announce many different aspects of the game during the course of the weekend. The first thing they said was a complete bomb drop.
When we announced Path of Exile 2 at ExileCon 2019, we told you guys that we were releasing it as an expansion to PoE 1 and that both campaigns would be playable
Oh,
on
the
same game
original
line and
release.
with a shared endgame. But PoE 2's scope has continued to grow and grow, and it's far more than just an expansion with a new campaign. It has entirely new monsters, skills, mechanics, classes, everything you'd expect from the next generation of action RPGs. Not to mention revamps of most of the PoE 1 League content. This thing is just freaking huge. There was a point where we realized that our plan to replace PoE 1 with PoE 2 would essentially be getting rid of a game that people love for no real reason. So we made a decision. Path of Exile 1 and 2 will be separate with their own mechanics, balance, endgames, and leagues.
The game had shifted completely into being its own separate entity. The reason for this was that the scope of the project continued to grow over time, to the point where it didn't make sense for it to be tied to the original game anymore. Many other important aspects of the game were announced and elaborated on.
One of the best changes, you can't see it because of my camera, but they used to have, it was going to have 5 flasks, which thank God is not a thing anymore.
At ExileCon 2023. Most notably, WASD and Dodge Roll, which go hand in hand with Path of Exile 2's entire combat philosophy. Their vision was a more deliberate and meaningful combat system that prioritized mechanical depth and clarity over raw speed. People often compare this philosophy to the Souls-like combat style.
Yep, here we go.
The uncut skill gem and updated skill gem system and UI were also displayed here, along with weapon swapping, weapon set passive points, and weapon-specific skills. Path of Exile 2's visuals also looked noticeably better than the 2029 showcase. The game looked gorgeous and truly looked like a next-generation ARPG. And finally, the bosses. And oh my god, they looked incredible. GGG was working on a slew of different bosses for almost every area in the game. Fighting them required precise timing of mechanics, dodge windows, and enduring multiple phases in some cases. Despite the overwhelming excitement, the general consensus around Path of Exile 2 at ExileCon 2023 was mixed but highly engaged. Many players were impressed by the visual upgrades, new animation systems, and more deliberate combat direction, praising the game's ambition and modern feel.
Dude, I remember this showcase of him like killing the monkey, and it was like fucking raid boss, and then people were like cheering when he gets the kill and stuff. And this poor monkey, they murdered my boy. Monkey went from a 25-man raid to a solo.
However, the slower pacing and shift in design philosophy sparked concern among longtime PoE 1 veterans who worried about the loss of identity. Overall, the community's response could be best described as cautious optimism, excited by the potential, but waiting to see how it would play out practically. After this, only one question remained. When was Path of Exile 2 officially going to release? That question was answered on August 20th, 2024 at Gamescom Opening Night Live.
On the early access date. Check this out.
The date in question was November 15th, 2024. The ambition was undeniable, but ambition doesn't always survive launch. After being pushed back by a couple weeks, GGG's vision was finally realized. Path of Exile 2 released into early access on December 6th, 2024. Is your computer struggling like someone trying to play Path of Exile from Europe? Mine.
Wait, is this a Starforge Systems ad?
It was lagging, freezing, and crashing. So I finally decided it was time to stop praying to RNG and actually do something about it. Then I met Icon Digital, the sponsor of today's video.
Oh, here it comes.
Icon is a free monitoring and
Did we just get
optimization app
segued?
that treats every PC like a top-tier system. It highlights the diagnostics of your CPU, GPU, RAM, and thermals, and uses less of your CPU than your taskbar clock. With
Am I
the
watching?
same
I'm watching an
gesto
ad.
button, you can perform one-step optimizations and tweaks.
He got me with an ad.
System performance. If your PC needs extra help, Icon's live service technicians can connect to your system remotely while you watch to remove malware.
What a professional ad, by the way. The dude pulled out the green screen for this.
Repair drivers, and restore
Put in the
system
effort.
performance. Shout out to Zudo, who helped me personally. That guy's a legend. Navigating my PC problems was a total skill issue. Let the pros at Icon buff your PC. Use the link in the video description to download Icon.
Crimson's calling out Blaze. He says, never do the bottom button on your jacket.
App for free.
So you know
And if
he's a
wanna
real
subscribe to
gamer.
the membership, use code BlazeWorksTV at checkout for 10% off your subscription. With that out of the way, let's get back to the video. The time had finally come. After 5 years of announcements, reveals, and teasers.
Used to be a tailor? Really, Crimson? Used to be a tailor? The lore expands.
Path of Exile 2 was playable to the public. It took the world by storm and saw massive viewership on Twitch at over 1 million people at the peak of its viewership. With regards to players, just shy of 580,000 people.
Yeah, this is absolutely, these are insane numbers. So apparently, Crimson was saying that the release of Path of Exile 2 was the 9th most watched, thing on Twitch's history.
Logged in to try
Which
the
is
game
nuts.
for the first time on Steam alone, making it the most successful and played PoE launch in the franchise's history, surpassing any Path of Exile 1 league to date. It also left a lot of room
At the time, now it's outside the top 10. Yeah, fair enough.
for excitement down the road. At launch, you had 6 playable classes to dive into: the Warrior, Mercenary, Ranger, Sorceress, Witch, and Monk. Each of these classes brought unique playstyles to the table. The campaign gave us Acts 1 through 3, which you had to tackle twice in order to reach the end game.
Oh my god, the game is so much better than having me do Cruel, dude. Doing Act 3 twice, just...
First on
shit.
normal, then on cruel difficulty, and honestly, this narrative and campaign was already a massive highlight for the game.
Cruel
With some
was-
of the most cinematic music, environments, and storytelling that I'd ever seen in an ARPG. Speaking of endgame, we actually got one at launch as well, and it came with a brand new Infinite Atlas, which was a sprawling, ever-expanding overworld with connected maps to explore. This was a huge departure from PoE 1's system, and it felt very exciting, but still very limited compared to the depth that players expected from the series. For those craving some of those familiar League mechanics, Breach, Expedition, Delirium, and Ritual were all live from day one, giving you some of that classic PoE flavor. When Path of Exile 2 hit early access, the hype was real, and it felt like GGG was really delivering that next level ARPG experience everyone had been waiting for. But as classic PoE launches go, things were far
And that's the last time I'll say nice things about a game. How was I supposed to know that word was a slur? We have fun here. Hi, Fleek. Starfield's new update is out, and it's already cured this man's cancer. This new update's been pimped as Starfield 2.0. Todd Howard is insisting that it isn't, but that's just our little retard the Modest Howard. That's what I call him. Underselling as he always does. People are saying this update is gonna fix everything that's wrong with Starfield. How dare you, Bethesda? That's the modder's job. Some people say the game can't be fixed. I agree, because you can't fix perfection. Can you fix a perfectly inflated tire? No. And you can't fix Starfield because it's the pinnacle of human achievement. Todd Howard reached for the stars and landed on the steppy stool. Starfield was boring on release, I'll admit it. And I'll also admit that you can't be boring in our current world. We've reached such levels of dopamine and stimming that managing a moon launch is a second monitor activity to WoW Classic. What did you expect out of World of Warcraft players? They've never even seen grass. You really think...
Hi, this is Ron here. Obviously, we're coming up with a new Path of Exile bundling right now. There's a lot of videos and stuff from content creators coming out, myself included. And Snap just made a video. I'm gonna watch it. And
Oh, blood rage. Oh, I got a fart, but I'm gonna poop. It's time to poop. that is a long delay.
One at a time.
Not unique. No, nightmare. Two, 4, 6, 8, 10. Two, 4, 6, 8, 9. Seven. Two, 4, 7. Oh, that's more. That's 8. Alrighty. Should I be running scarabs on the nightmare maps? Anybody?
Relics of a forbidden past, hidden away,
Nobody.
forgotten.
Nobody's there.
You die rather well.
You've done well.
Oh. That might be... That might be difficult. I don't know what mods I put on.
Make your wish. battle begins.
Nothing is pure. Relics of a forbidden past, hidden away, forgotten.
I can't do this just yet. Must you constantly interfere?
The astral chain is broken.
Cast yourself into oblivion.
You will know pain. Inevitable. I will bathe this world in blood. Impressive, but futile.
I can't do this just
You
yet.
will know pain! You are only delaying the inevitable.
All 85. That sucks. Oops.
Hey guys, Gassy TV here with another Path of Exile 2 video, and in this one I'm going to talk about 0.5 predictions or expectations / hopes. Got a couple of topics to go through, and I'm going to go through them step by step and give you my personal opinion on it. And what I would like to hear is your thoughts on these topics as well, what your expectations, hopes, or predictions are coming for 0.5, which we're hoping we're going to see some information or teases at least, or at least the announcement of announcement coming in the next week or so. By the way, if you happen to enjoy this type of content, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe for more content. It really helps out the channel quite a lot, way more than you think. If you do that, appreciate your support, guys. Let's crack on with the video. The first topic I want to cover is obviously what we're all expecting 0.5 to be, and that is a massive endgame patch rework. And I think that one of the parts of this is introducing some proper endgame pinnacle related content to engage with, but more specifically for generic mapping. Now, I do believe a lot of my personal opinions will be very closely connected to the idea of what PoE 1 is doing. And I do want to point out that even so that I believe these things could be good, I think that PoE 1 and PoE 2 should be obviously quite separated, and we don't want PoE 2 to just turn into another Path of Exile 1, even though some people might want that. So I do believe that something in the lines of how Nightmare Maps is running in PoE 1 is a really cool system that they have, where you have your maps up to tier 16 and you have this extra step if you want to do the pinnacle versions of it. And I think that potentially versions of this could make its way into PoE 2. But more importantly, when it comes to the endgame changes, I think has more to do with some other parts of it. First, I want to cover the topic of towers. And I think the towers have been, kind of the bad, the bad part of the Atlas in iterations as we move into 0.5, and they have seen some improvements, but a lot of people are still not happy with them. I believe that they're going to further improve the towers in the form of letting them be acting as grand projects. Essentially, a clear tower acting as a grand project would allow players to explore further, faster, and or skip maybe map layouts people simply don't like. So what is a grand project? Essentially is a way for you to clear a map with a grand project on the tower, allows you to then basically leapfrog your ass over to another map within a radius of the circle, and basically don't have to connect and do every map to that point. And if every tower in the game allowed you to do these grand projects leapfrogging, that would allow people to rush and farm, finding citadels faster, finding interesting maps they want to do. It would allow them to have a better and easier access to skipping layouts that they don't want to run. I do think that this is a really cool way to further push the idea of the Atlas system that they have already. Obviously, we have some generic takes on this from me personally, such as more juicing options, something in the lines of the improving of tablet use cases. I think the tablets are somewhat underused. I'm not sure even how they would begin to make an improvement of tablet use cases, but I'm hoping we'll see some changes there to make it a little bit more accessible. I also think that generic Atlas improvements via search bar functionality to begin with is something that I'm expecting to see in the 0.5 update. However, the big thing for Endgame, in my opinion, is going to be the Atlas Tree Complete rework. To be something similar to what is being used in PoE 1 perhaps, but at the same time, like I mentioned earlier, we do want them to be separated and not be the same game in the end. We don't want PoE 2 to be PoE 1.5. However, the counter argument obviously is that we shouldn't have that happening. In an interview with ZD, Mark did say that he opened the Atlas tree and basically said it sucks. He also said that the Atlas tree is going to be completely reinvented, also using words as it being from a different universe. So we're going to be interested to see how the Atlas tree rework is going to take in place, considering how beloved the actual process of this is, the mechanic of this is in Path of Exile 1. I think PoE 2 obviously has to have a bit of different approach to it, but I think that a more extensive Atlas Passive tree is going to be one of the biggest things that can happen for the endgame changes. I do have one last part to bring up to this conversation for this topic, and that is power creep question. Are they going to increase the intensity or lower it with increased rewards to double down on the idea of immersive, meaningful combat they set out to do originally, and possibly giving players maybe the option to achieve this with the Atlas tree and or tablets? That is one of the biggest questions I have with this, because again, we're still lacking a sense of where they're going with the game. Are we going to allow us to have these screen clearing, ultra power creep stuff that we had in one, or are they going to take this opportunity to bring some things back down to a more meaningful, immersive combat approach? Let me know in the comments below what you guys think of this. That said, we're going to move over to the next topic, and that is class/weapon type. Due to the fact that they postponed the massive endgame changes from 0.4 to now 0.5, I don't think that we have a new class or weapon type ready to deploy for us in 0.5. Now, the counter argument here is that the endgame changes were already in progress, aimed for 0.4, meaning they might have been able to finish it soon enough so that they could allocate resources on other things for 0.5, such as a new class and weapon type. Whether or not the next class's release happens for 0.5 or later, what class do you guys think it will be? I believe it will be on the opposite side of the tree from the Druid, which is a strength and intelligence based class, and therefore expecting the next class to be heavily focused on the dexterity part, such as a Shadow or an Assassin, or potentially a Duelist to finally provide swords to the game. Either way, a new class or weapon type, I believe, are going to be 100% connected with one another. I doubt they will introduce a new weapon type without introducing it with the associated class. The other topic I want to cover is a little bit on the topic of new classes, or more ascendancy rather, and that is Trial of the Ancestors. Now, for the people who don't know what Trial of the Ancestor is, it's an old league mechanic from PoE 1, being based off your generic auto battle chess games with a touch of ARPG to it, where you as a player are participating in fighting on the battlefield. And there also used to be leaderboards and rating system with how this operated, with factions. You basically collected and purchased the units, and then you had this board where you placed them in. It was a really cool mechanic. Personally, I felt like it had a little bit too much of a touch of ARPG. I would have rather seen them double down on the auto battler approach more so than not. However, this has been more or less confirmed from multiple sources, including the PoE 2 art book, that we see the possibility of this in the campaign, yet has not made it into the game yet as an ascendancy for ascending, or choice for ascending. A lot of people are not very satisfied with the current options of ascending their classes in the game and have been waiting for the third method for a long time now, and I believe that this will come in 0.5. Well, let me in the comments below what you guys think of this. On the topic of ascendancies, we have another part that I think is kind of connected to the idea or the topic of the Trial of the Ancestors, and that is that we are still lacking a third ascendancy for the Ranger, the Druid, the Huntress, and the Monk. And if we include the Abyssal Lich in the conversation as a proper ascendancy, GGG has provided us with at the very least one new ascendancy class, or a new class entirely, every
84.
league since launch. And I think it's fair to assume that we'll see at the very least one new ascendancy class or class in 0.5 as well. Either way, we're going to move over to the next topic, which is going to be campaign acts. And I do have a bit of a hot take here, so strap yourself in and please don't hate me for it. And in here, we're going to be covering the fact that GGG is more often than not over-delivering on launches, with some exceptions, of course. 0.5 is meant to be a full-blown endgame focused update, making me expect them not to touch the campaign whatsoever, less so add another act. Now, my hot take on this specific conversation, and maybe you have a different take, and if you do, let me know in the comments below. But my hot take goes as this. Jonathan is saying that early access was going to be for about a year. If they couldn't hit the December, then likely the launch would be in March. It didn't happen. It's also important to remember that Jonathan has said that they are fine with releasing it without all the classes and weapons, but not fine with releasing it without the entire campaign done. With ExileCon around the corner, they might be holding the campaign releases to have this big drop with a full launch in December and utilizing ExileCon even more so as a marketing tool, with how big that could be to the majority of the player base, who is the casual player base that do care about the campaign more so than any other type of player in the entire community. Maybe we'll see a full launch in December. Let me know if you think otherwise. Next topic we'll be covering is going to be the league mechanic, and I think they will be presented as a mapping content to further push available interactable content in maps, unlike something like the temple that takes the player away from mapping. Since crafting has its ups and downs with the introduction and then removal of homogenizing omens, I also believe that the league mechanic will have some sort of association to crafting. I'm confident in it being a 2.0 version of a PoE 1 mechanic, or hell, even a mix of PoE 1 mechanics turned into something more evolved, which we've seen in the past couple of weeks.
Oh, what?
The remains, though, what mechanic would it then be? My bet is on a delve-like mechanic to not just double or triple, but straight up quadruple down on the entire approach of this patch being a massive endgame 0.5 patch. A delve-like mechanic would essentially, potentially, if they do something similar to what is in PoE, provide you with, quite honestly, a second separated infinite atlas, if you will, which would very much quadruple down on the idea of this being an endgame playable patch. Another idea that I liked very much is actually the bestiary, also known as Einar League, where you're tracking down a beast, and potentially this could extend beyond just one map, as in you're tracking a beast that has gone from a map to map to map, and your destination is to finally find this big monster that is a noticeably bigger, rare / unique boss fight or something. It sounds cool on paper, but the problem I see with this type of approach, which actually sounds very enticing, is how would this be introduced in a way that would make every map you interact with as interesting or engaging to do, or no, more importantly, rewarding during the tracking process to get to the big void.
Just yet.
But I like the idea of this, and I do hope that we get something like Delve or Bestiary, but it also has a lot to do with me expecting them to introduce crafting stuff, which is the next topic. On the topic of crafting, we all remember the beauty of homogenizing omens back in 0.3, which quite honestly made crafting so considerably strong. It was later removed in 0.4 without any sort of compensation from that power removal outside of the Veil modifiers. This turned crafting back to the slot machine feel, despite having access to methods such as essences still being widely used, as well as Veil modifiers via the newly introduced Abyssal mechanics. Crafting is in today's state of the game somewhat lackluster, mostly focused on having a proper base to work with, and then quote-unquote hope you hit a handful of the modifiers, some of which are targetable to some degree. Mark has confirmed multiple times that crafting specifically will be seeing a lot of attention with every new league mechanic when possible. My personal opinion here is that there should be some sort of crafting bench with a locked cost of meta crafts and prefixes and suffixes that cannot be changed. That alone should shift the crafting power to become more accessible for majority of the player base. However, I doubt this will happen. I also doubt they will ever let us re-roll items such as the classic alteration orb from PoE 1. Another hot take here from me is that there is a resistance swap available in Path of Exile 1 via the Harvest Craft bench, which would be pretty effective in PoE 2, as this avoids finding an upgrade on the ground which you can't equip without changing 1, 2, or even more other items due to a specific resistance.
Oh, this is going to be slow.
Roll being on that item. So by giving us the power of resistance swapping or even attribute swapping on items as a crafting method, may it be from a crafting bench or an omen, would allow us to emphasize on the idea of us actually finding upgrades on the ground, which I feel is being halted as a result of this restriction. That's my expectation, is that we might actually see either Einar, the Bestiary, or Delve-like mechanic. I hope that they also come with their connected crafting mechanics. Einar for the Beastcrafts, of course, and Delve for fossils and resonators, to whatever degree they see fit to fit it into the PoE 2 scene. The last topic I wanted to cover in this video is going to be the current state of the temple. The current state of PoE 2 is lacking the bulk of content that PoE 1 has after more than a decade of development. As a result of this, I think it's fair to assume that more or less every mechanic introduced to the game is expected to go forward. Now, that said, it's also safe to assume that the temple mechanic will be drastically nerfed compared to its current state of insanity. The question that pops up from that standpoint is, how are they going to nerf the temple mechanic whilst providing enough incentive to actually running the mechanic to begin with? Obviously, enemies or fights such as the Etziri boss and the Vaal Architect drop tables is one incentive, but building a snake or ramping up generic rewards other than just rush the boss is a whole different story. I genuinely do not know how they're going to succeed in this, but let me know in the comment below how you think they should nerf the temple to make that a core mechanic that is actually interesting to run, but also incentivizes us to engage with it to begin with. Obviously, my list of predictions, hopes, and takes are not all going to come true. Maybe some, maybe none at all. Who knows? Let me know in the comments below what you guys think is going to happen based on my predictions. Maybe you have some other takes, but share that with the world there, and we'll take a look at it. I'll be reading through the comments as well.
I can't do this.
But this is my take on it, and I hope you guys enjoy the video. I'm quite excited for 0.5, and you'll see me spending a lot more time in PoE 2 now, leading up to us getting some t-shirts and announcement and information. But again, I'll see you guys in the next video. Till then, stay safe, rock it. Hey guys, GazaTV here with another Path of Exile video, and in this one we're going to talk about the Path of Building being updated with 3.28, as well as me being able to update some of the Path of Building links. Congregation support is the main topic for this video. I will not really make a separate video, one for Dominating Blow, one for Spectres, for example, which are the two main builds we'll be talking about. Instead, I'm going to cover them all in this video. So first and foremost, Congregation is one of the new exceptional support gems. This was extremely cheap just 2 days ago. I bought it for 3 divines, and then, well, things happened, and they're about 3 or 4 times the cost now. I expected this to be hilariously expensive. So I'm going to first start about talking about this for Spectres, since a lot of people asked me about Spectres. The question, we got verified, big shout out to people from our community, Kindness, Might, Sin, and everyone. We are in a position where the question was, how does this actually calculate?
That's coming from his stream.
Does it apply before or after Dark Monarch helmet, which doubles your Spectre count? Or does it apply, does it count only the base amount of Spectres you have from the gem, which is 1 up to level 13, then it's 2 up to level 25, then it's 3 forever on there on out. So we did a bunch of testing and verified it. Apparently, it's based off your max count Spectres before Dark Monarch doubles it, which means you can get 3 from level 25 gem. You can get +1 from a chest piece. You can get +1 from Death Attunement on the tree. You can get +1 from a Bitterbind point. That is 6 Spectres. Now in Path of Exile 1, decimals rounds down. The important part to keep in mind is that this starts at, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong here, chat, it's 30%, 30, 34, 38 from level 1, 2, 3. then it's 42, and I believe it's 44 after that. So these are the numbers. Let me get a notepad so it's easier to show you guys. These are congregation level min scaling. So knowing this, and we can have X amount of specters depending on how we set these up, it's important to go through the process of what level of congregation do you actually need. Now, since congregation, I expected this to be mega expensive, and I think that once people realize how insanely strong this is, it will very likely be super expensive. I have therefore not, but deliberately not going to include this in medium budget builds. I will make a mention in this video with what you can do to put the gem in case you decide to play it, have it for a medium budget. But I think this is going to be exclusively for high budget builds because it should be extremely expensive. So let's look at specters. If you have a generic endgame specter build, that means you get 5 specters. The super high budget versions of specter builds, you choose to stay Forged Frostbearers, upon which you get 6 base specters, double with Dark Monarch, or you do the Doriani, which is something I prefer, which still caps you at 5. So what does this mean? At 5 specters, and you multiply this with 1 point. Sorry, I can't even type. Multiply it by 1.34, that's a level 2 congregation, which is 6.7.
Inevitable.
6.7 equals 6 specters.
Swift death.
Because the decimals rounds down. But if you have 5 times 1.38, it's the exact same process. 1.34 and 1.38.
Inevitable.
In this case,
Man, those
we
are...
end up at 6.9, which is still 6. However, 5 times 1.42 is 7.1, which equals 7. This is before doubling. So this means that if you are playing a specter build that has a cap of 5 specters without Dark Monarch, your base cap, which can be achieved by Bitterbind Point, Death Attunement, level 25 Spectre Gem to get 3, as well as the Spectre Chest Piece, right? Those are your sources of increasing this that mainly are used. There are a couple of other sources you can get more from, but those are the ones that mainly are being used in this game right now for the current state of Spectre builds. This means that 7 puts you at 14 Specters, because Dark Monarch is scaling. That's
fucking shit.
However, if you're playing like something like the Forged Frostbearer build, you can get a cap of 6 Specters. Now, 6 Specters times 1.3 is not going to help you, because 1.3 is 7.8. However, in a level 2, 4, if you're running with a level 2 congregation, that puts you at 8.04, which is already rounded to 8.
You will know pain!
What this is telling us is that for you to get the best benefit out of the congregation is in a scenario where you play something like a Doriani build, which has higher damage outputs, faster clearing, all of those things, then you would need a level 4 congregation to get the maximum value out of it. Whereas in a setup where you're staying for Frostbearers and put your money into getting a +1 Spectre chest piece so that your base cap is 6, you only need a level 2 congregation. So basically your money investment is shifted. You chest piece versus congregation in this example, right? If you want to, make it easier to understand. So basically, again, if you have a cap of 5 Spectres, so you want a max value of congregation, you need to get level 4. If you have 6 Spectres, you only need a level 2 congregation, because the other numbers don't matter. You can take 6 times 1.38. That rounds down to 8. 6 times 1.42. That rounds down to 8. 6 times 1.44 rounds down to 8. There's no point in having anything but a level 2 congregation at that point. Plus Spectre is an expensive stat. It is, yes. So, now that we know how the congregation works, now we're going to see where do you put this in the build and how does it work when you have 2 different separated Spectre gems. PUB seems to be calculating decimals rounding up, which is not how it works in Path of Exile. I'll also be covering Dominating Blow right after this, so bear with me. So the PUB will be updated as of this video on my written guides, all linked in the descriptions below. This is medium budget Spectre build. I have not changed the gems I'm using on the main support gems for this skill, which put this at a cap on this specific build. This does have a plus Spectre, but does not have the Bitterbind points, so this build could get plus base of 6 Spectres. The reason I don't push Forged Frostbearers into super high budget is because I don't like the idea of going CI when I am going to move into Doriani's prototype, which is, in my opinion, the better version. But both versions works perfectly fine. I know that there's a CI version that is a great build as well, works perfectly fine, and is, without a doubt, both builds are fantastic performers. This version that I have does not do that. So I don't put the congregation in. However, if you look at the utility Spectre setup, which is a separate 4-link, they have a cap of 10 Spectres. The main one, cap of 10 Spectres. Now you can bring this up to 12, like I said.
In blood.
If you were to put congregation on this, you would put the congregation on your utility Spectre. Now there are two things to think about. One, it replaces one of your support gems. Either Bone Chill, which you don't want to remove, Feeding Frenzy, which you don't want to remove, or Elemental Army, which you'd rather not remove in this example. Which is fine, Elemental Army can go and you'll be fine. But in the current league, we can use the coins. So if you look at your Race Spectre, this is in this POB in this budget, level 28. If you use a level 20 Race Spectre gem instead, that is perfectly fine. It's not going to change your Spectre count, but it does allow you to have Feeding Frenzy, Elemental Army, or Bone Chill supported on the gem instead, which means you don't have to sacrifice a gem that much to put the congregation in here. So in this example, with 5 Spectre count, we are going to be sitting at a situation of getting 1 extra Spectre if you don't have a level 4 one, or if you have higher ones, you get more. The important part here is to understand that, let's say that we get 1 extra, which with the Dark Monarch helmet is going to double it. That's 2 extra. So in this example, I have 4 utility Spectres and 6 damage Spectres. If I make it so that the utility Spectre setup can have 2 more Spectres, I'm not going to change how many support Spectres I'm running. Instead, I will just add 2 damage Spectres. But it will say that my minion limit on utility Spectres is 12, whereas the minion limit of my damage Spectres is still 10. What it means is that you want to make sure that you don't summon more than 12 Spectres either way, because you still have the ceiling to achieve. You can't benefit from putting congregation on your main damage Spectres as well. So in that example, the only thing that's going to happen is I will add 2 more damage Spectres and I will have the same setup of utility. It becomes a little easier, a little nuttier when you go to high budget systems.
1% chance.
In the POB, I have added congregation in here. In this example, I took away Culling Strike, and the reason I took away Culling Strike, and you don't even need to use the coin for this version to get that specific kind of Spectre gem. You can use the level 21 if you want to, or you can choose to run it, and it doesn't matter. It's because in this example, we're using a level 4 congregation on the high budget Spectre build, which puts the Spectre limit to 14 on the utility, where I have 10 on the damage Spectres. This allows me to run 10 damage Spectres and then 4 utility Spectres on top of that. This is for Wretched Defilers, which in higher budget will have a fewer Spectres than Forged Frostbearers, and they do have a higher performance, but you have a lower quantity of them. In this example, instead of just running the Perfect Guardian Turtle and Perfect Spirit of Fortune, I will add a Forest Warrior. POB doesn't include a culling, so I added this in the POB, because Forest Warrior, you don't need a perfect version of this. Gives your minions a new onslaught, which is very attractive, but also Culling Strike. So you get that for free, which was originally just linked in this setup. And we also add a Forest Tiger. Now, the Perfect Forest Tiger gives a Haste Star, which is incredibly good and just speeds up the build even more. And this build will include a culling, so I added this Perfect Guardian Turtle and Perfect Spirit of Fortune. I will add a Forest Warrior. POB doesn't include a culling, so I added this in the POB, because Forest Warrior, you don't need a perfect version of this. Gives your minions a new onslaught, which is very attractive, but also Culling Strike. So you get that for free, which was originally just linked in this setup. And we also add a Forest Tiger. Now, the Perfect Forest Tiger gives a Haste Star, which is incredibly good and just speeds up the build even more. And this build was already extremely fast. However, you can choose to run something else instead of the Forest Tiger. There are options like the Primal Rex Matriarch. You could have a defensive set Spectres. You can have aura providing Spectres in general for other means that you feel is more important. But I would run the Forest Tiger myself because it's absolutely super fast. It's crazy. But that's how I did it when it comes to the Spectre setup, and I hope that kind of covers you guys when it comes to the way of setting it up. But all of this will be updated in the written guides linked in the descriptions below. There you'll find the POBs as well. Now let's talk about Dominating Blow. Dominating blue. We're doing the same thing here. We've made some changes, so I'll walk you through them real quick. Low budget has not changed, and yes, we are using hypothermia in the low budget. Medium budget, however, we have made a change to the Pantheon to use the Aberrath to be unaffected by burning ground. The reason for this was because of the bloodline for this one with 6 corrupted items was a little wonky to sustain in burning ground maps, so we made sure to fix that. Shout out to Atros for that, by the way, because I've been on my ass about that since the dawn of this build's creation. Either way, in this setup, we made a quick change. Rigval's Hunt is being used instead of Brastone. You can use Rigval's Hunt or Brastone, both works fine, but Rigval's Hunt is very cheap, and finding one with a corrupted duration, minion, or gems, or both is not that bad. And the damage went up, but the defense went down a little bit, but not much. But we then added Fortify, so we could get more than the 10 stacks of Fortify that Kingmaker provides. Outside of that, no other changes. Again, I'm not going to be using Congregation in here because I think the budget price for Congregation is too much for medium budgets. However, here's the cool thing. In the high budget version, we are using a level 3 Congregation on the Vaal Domination. This allows us
Yo, what's going on, bros? We're back, new video.
Yo.
Occupied emergency. I want to report a fire. I don't know if it's been reported already.
A suspect is in custody after allegedly starting a fire at an Ontario, California warehouse. The Ontario Fire Department responded to the call at a 1.2 million square foot facility operated by Kimberly-Clark, a distribution warehouse for paper products. The Ontario Fire Department said the blaze reached a 6-alarm response and required almost 200 firefighters, 20 engine companies, 15 truck companies, 2 ambulances, 17 chief officers, and 3 investigators to contain. 29-year-old Shamel Abdul Karim, an employee of NFI Industries, a third-party distribution company for Kimberly-Clark products, has been identified as a suspect in the fire and has been taken into custody. This comes after a video was reportedly posted on Abdul Karim's private Facebook page showing how the incident began. In the video, a man said, "You know, if you're not going to pay us enough to afford to live, at least pay us enough not to do this," as he lights a package of toilet paper on fire. In 2 other videos, the man says, "All you had to do is pay us enough to live, and there goes your inventory," as pallets of products burned in the background. The Ontario Police Department says they are, quote, reviewing and working to authenticate the footage as part of the ongoing investigation. There were no reported injuries to responders or anyone else in the building. Abdul Karim was charged with felony arson of a structure and aggravated arson. He is being held without bail at West Valley Detention Center.
Can you believe it, guys? We are almost 2 months in to the Last of the Druids update, and I am still going strong with Path of Exile 2, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are on the same boat as me and are hungry for more. So today's video is going to be covering my favorite builds in the second month of Path of Exile 2's The Last of the Druid update, because there are some amazing builds out there, and I want to share those with you guys today. But before we get started, I just want to say that if you enjoy any of these builds on the video today, remember to hit the like and sub button because it helps the channel a ton, and I also stream on twitch.tv/MisoXcheer every single night, so I'd love to see you guys there. But without further ado, let's get into the builds. The first build I want to share with y'all is going to be the Oil Barrage Wyvern Amazon build by JMac. And oh my gosh, this build is likely the flashiest build that I have seen in all of Path of Exile 2's history. Just take a look at the footage. You are seeing a wyvern that is shooting lightning bolts all over the screen and is splashing everywhere, leaving piles of electrocuted corpses all over the ground. The main skill that this build uses is going to be Oil Barrage, which if you've played Wyvern before, you've probably used it as a single target option. But JMac says no, I want to turn this into a screen clearing monster. To understand how he does this, let's start by taking a look at the Oil Barrage skill gem. Oil Barrage is an ability that normally allows the wyvern to spit oil at enemies, which create an oil ground where projectiles land. By default, this doesn't do any damage, and all it does is apply exposure to the enemy. But when you consume a power charge, this transforms it from a debuff to a channeled ability that basically shoots a lightning railgun at the enemy and does a ton of damage. And keep in mind this keyword channeled, because this will come into play in a huge way later down the line. Now, if we just leave it as is, it is an excellent option for single target damage. But in order to make it a screen clearing monster, we need to cover a bigger part of the screen, and that's where the Nova projectile support comes in. This allows Oil Barrage to fire a circle around the character. But since it only shoots 3 projectiles, this is pretty underwhelming. And this is where the support gem Salvo comes in. This support gem allows supported skills to fire 2 additional projectiles per seal consumed, and you can gain up to 3 maximum seals every 2 seconds. And this is where the keyword channeled comes in. You see, the cool part about channeled abilities is that as long as you don't let go of the ability itself, it will keep the properties of the skill when you started the channeling process. So if you have a maximum of 3 seals and fire 2 additional projectiles per seal consumed, that means you are firing a total of 6 extra projectiles for your Oil Barrage. And as long as you're holding down that Oil Barrage button, those 6 projectiles will continue to shoot as you are channeling the Oil Barrage skill. And that is how JMac makes it so that Oil Barrage turns into an absolute screen clearing monster. Now, you might be wondering, what about those power charges? How do we actually get those? Well, JMac actually uses a spear on his secondary weapon set and puts Culmination and Aelith's Chimes on his spear stab. Aelith's Chimes allows you to expend combo to have a chance to gain power charges, and he gains combo by using Whirling Slash. And the best part is that Whirling Slash also doubles as a mobility skill. So on top of being able to gain power charges with Whirling Slash, he is also able to move around the map extremely quickly. So if you want to play an extremely flashy all-rounder build that can clear any content in the game and is also moving around the map at Mach 5, I would definitely recommend giving JMac's Oil Barrage Wyvern Amazon a shot. And speaking of builds that can clear the entire screen, the next build that I'm going to highlight is going to be 787 Prada's Whirling Assault Smith of Kitava. Now, I'm sure you've seen plenty of Whirling Assault builds out there, and you're like, wait a second, what makes this one so special? Well, do I have something to tell you? In this build, Prada uses the Smith of Kitava. Normally, people associate the Smith of Kitava with extreme tankiness, and that is true for this build. But where this build truly shines is its usage of Fire Spell on hit. This is a meta skill that is specific to Smith of Katava that allows you to gain energy per enemy that you hit with your melee attacks. So, as opposed to something like Cast on Crit or Cast on Ailment where you have to fulfill a pretty steep condition, this is basically just saying, hey, go hit the enemy and you can now start casting spells alongside of it. Pretty crazy, right? Well, there is a small downside where the only types of spells that you can actually use with this ability are fire spells. So you can't quite go and spam comment like every other cast on build out there. But this build uses Detonate Dead linked to Fire Spell and Hit, which is actually extremely powerful. While being one of the least used abilities in Path of Exile 2, it is actually one of the strongest hitting spells in the entire game, because as the monsters that you fight get harder and harder, the spell also hits harder and harder, which essentially means that this spell is scaling infinitely as long as the monsters are getting more difficult. The reason for that is because it is a spell that deals damage based on the monster's life. You see, most of the time, when you kill a monster, it leaves a corpse, and this spell detonates that corpse and deals physical damage based off of that corpse's maximum life. So, this means that as the monsters get more and more life, you are also dealing more and more damage. And this in combination with Whirling Assault, which basically hits the entire screen and more, allows for a build that clears every single thing that you can see with one click of a button. But that's not all there is to this build, because it uses a little bit of a cool trick to make it so that it can move around the map extremely quickly. On its second weapon set, it is using the unique one-handed mace called Trench Timber. And this mace, on top of giving you a huge amount of increased attack speed, also has a line that says increases and reductions to minion attack speed also affect you. But wait, this build doesn't use any minions. Why is this such a good item? Well, this build uses the node Commanding Rage, which makes it so that every point in rage that you have also grants your minions increased attack speed. And guess what? Because this build uses Trench Timber, every point of rage actually gives you increased attack speed. So this build gets up to 44% increased attack speed just by using Trench Timber and this node. And this is important because this build also uses Bone Shatter, which doesn't do much damage, but when you have extremely high attack speed, Bone Shatter works similarly to Whirling Assault and allows you to move around the map extremely quickly. So if you're looking for a little bit of an off-meta build that can clear the entire screen and more with just the press of one button, I would highly recommend you to check out 787 Prada's Whirling Assault Smith of Katava. Now this third build comes from a small, tiny creator that you may not have heard of, and his name's Jung Roan. And as per usual, this man is showing us an insanely overpowered build that will likely get nerfed next league called the Infinite Burn Oil Grenade Witch Hunter. Now, if you haven't heard of this build already, you're probably living under a rock, because this is probably the most powerful build of the entire league, and it's not even close. Now, I know what you're saying. You're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Wasn't Cast on Crit Comet the most powerful build? Well, sort of. Cast on Crit Comet is extremely powerful and very efficient at clearing things like Temple. But when it comes to ceiling damage, nothing will come close to this build because it is infinitely scaling. So let me explain how this build works. Its main spell is going to be Incinerate, which is a spell that shoots a cone of flames in front of you, and any enemy you hit gets ignited. And unlike normal ignites, this ignite compounds,
Nothing is infinitely
which
scaling
means that
in this game.
every single time you ignite the enemy, it will remove the previous ignite and multiply its ignite magnitude, meaning that for a channeling ability like Incinerate, you are constantly applying ignites and reapplying it and multiplying the ignite damage. So, as long as you are able to hit the enemy with this ability, the damage itself will just keep on growing and keep on getting more and more powerful. And this is where the infinite scaling comes from. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're like, wait a second, that sounds extremely broken. Why does this spell even exist in the game? Well, normally there are a couple of drawbacks. The first drawback is that this spell doesn't use mana, but it uses a new resource called Fuel. And without going into massive detail about what Fuel does and how to generate it, it basically limits you from being able to hold down Incinerate forever. You eventually need to stop holding it down and use another skill to generate Fuel to allow you to use Incinerate again. And the second drawback is that Incinerate has a pretty small area of effect. So that, in combination with the fact that you can't actually spam this ability, means that it's pretty much relegated to a single target ability and you can't really map with it. But that's where Oil Grenade comes in. This ability covers the entire ground and any enemies in that range with oil. And just like how oil works in real life, if you burn that oil, everything in that area becomes incinerated. So that means if you use Incinerate on top of the oil, that will cause any enemies standing in that oil to become instantly ignited and have that ignite compound every single second they are being burned. So this is what allows you to infinitely stack that ignite, even though normally Incinerate is unable to be held down for a long period of time. So no matter where you are in the game, whether you have a ton of budget or no budget at all, this build will basically allow you to do any and all content in the game extremely smoothly. And that's why I recommend you checking out Jungrone's Infinite Burn Oil Grenade Witch Hunt.
Sorry.
But one thing I need to warn you about before you hop into this build is that this build, on top of absolutely incinerating and frying all of the enemies in front of you, might also fry your GPU. So build it at your own risk. Now, the fourth build on this list is a special one because it is probably my favorite build of the entire league. And that is going to be Circle Circus Games' Hammer of the Gods Titan. Now, this build is something that I tried to recreate myself, and since then, he has taken this build to the absolute next level. And I would have to say, this is probably the coolest build I have ever seen in Path of Exile 2. What this build focuses around is one thing: spamming as many Hammer of the Gods as possible. You see, normally Hammer of the Gods is a skill that requires glory, which is notoriously hard to build. But this league, the game added a brand new lineage support gem called Xerfes Infamy. This support gem gives any skill that you link with it the ability to have an increased amount of damage on top of an increased amount of AoE. But this is at the cost of adding a glory cost to any skill that's linked to it. Now, this sounds like a pretty rough negative because glory is usually pretty hard to obtain. So what makes this support gem so good, and how does it help you spam more Hammer of the Gods when it adds an extra glory cost on top of it? Well, Xerfes Infamy allows you to gain glory equal to 5% of the life spent on other skills. So now, you don't actually have to fulfill the normal glory requirements to activate Hammer of the Gods. You can just spend life on other skills and have it enable your Hammer of the Gods to be spammed as much as you want. And how Circus is able to do this is actually really cool. To start, this character uses blood magic, so every spell, every attack that he casts will always cost life, which all contributes to getting more glory for his Hammer of the Gods. But on top of this, he is always casting some of the highest mana cost spells in the game, which are curses. He is using both Elemental Weakness and Enfeeble in this build to basically make it so that every time he casts one of those curses, he is getting the full glory cost for his Hammer of the Gods to be used. So he casts a curse and boom, he has enough glory for using Hammer of the Gods. But that sounds kind of slow, having to cast a curse and then use Hammer of the Gods. That sounds like it is going to be a lot of work. But here comes the 5-head tech in this build. On his secondary weapon set, he links Cast on Minion Death to Elemental Weakness and Enfeeble, which makes it so that whenever your minions die, Elemental Weakness and Enfeeble are automatically casted. But how does he get Cast on Minion Death to activate? Well, he uses Wolfpack, which is a spirit gem that allows you to summon wolf minions, and much like 787 Prada's build, he uses Trench Timber combined with Bone Shatter to move across the map extremely quickly. But Bone Shatter is also linked to Minion Pact, which allows him to kill his minions every single time he is using Bone Shatter. So while he is zooming across the map using Bone Shatter, he is constantly casting Elemental Weakness and Enfeeble to give him enough glory to spam Hammer of the Gods. So yeah, this build is so cool, and I'm sure you can see why it's my favorite build of the entire league. So if you ever thought to yourself, man, I wish I could use Hammer of the Gods more, well, this is your build. And also a quick note is that while Circle Circus Games is a Japanese YouTuber, he knows English and can speak English fluently, so I'd highly recommend you checking out his stream if you have any questions for him about the build itself. And finally, we have our 5th and last build, which is going to be CCS's Fire Infused Ball Lightning Blood Mage. Now, this build is extremely near and dear to my heart because I actually wanted to make a Ball Lightning build work in 0.3, but could never figure out how to actually do it. And CCS is able to do it and make it an absolute machine. Now, if you've ever seen Ball Lightning being used in Path of Exile 2, normally it's just used to enable Lightning Warp to allow you to blink over to the Ball Lightning. But this build uses Ball Lightning as its main source of damage. You see, normally Ball Lightning is a slow-moving projectile that doesn't do much damage. But when you infuse it with a Fire Infusion, Ball Lightning will now drop ignited ground as it travels forward and explode, dealing fire damage in an area after it dissipates. So, the combination of the ignited ground and the explosion end up dealing a ton of damage to any enemies who happen to walk along its path. And of course, much like the majority of spellcasters out there this league, this build doesn't manually cast Ball Lightning, but instead it uses Dodri's Undoing linked with Elemental Weakness to cast Ball Lightning using Cast on Critical and Living Bomb with Cast on Elemental Ailment to allow you to cast the Ball Lightnings with the Fire Infusions. So maybe you can say it's just another cast on crit build, but hey, it's not Comets and it also looks extremely cool with its purple flames all over the ground. So yeah, those are my top 5 favorite builds of the Last of the Druids season in the 2nd month. But surprise, that is not actually going to be the last build of this video because I do have an honorable mention for one of my favorite builds of this league, and I didn't include it in the rest of the video because it's actually my build. And that is going to be my Glacial Lance Ritualist. And this is definitely my favorite build that I've made this league. And the reason why I like it so much is very simple. Because I think that Glacial Lance is one of the most visually appealing skills in the entire game and is also extremely satisfying to play. Now, as the build suggests, this build uses Glacial Lance as its main ability. And how this skill works is that when you use the Glacial Lance ability, it'll throw an Icy Spear in a straight line in front of you. And if you consume a Frenzy Charge, it will allow the glacial fragments that were created by the initial projectile to explode outwards for an even higher amount of damage. Now, normally in Path of Exile 2, Frenzy Charges are a little bit difficult to create consistently. There are only a few ways to do it, and they usually have some sort of inherent cooldown associated with it, or you need to give up big damage to be able to generate them. But that's where the Ritualist comes in. You see, this build uses the unique Topaz charm called Velocco's Roar. And what this Topaz charm does is that whenever you take lightning damage, it will give you lightning resistance on top of generating you a Frenzy Charge. Now, normally, this is not a very consistent way of generating charges because it relies on enemies hitting you with lightning damage. And on top of that, the charm itself can only be used twice before it runs out of charges. So normally, this makes it so that it is practically impossible to rely on this charm to generate a consistent amount of Frenzy Charges. But that's where the Ritualist comes in. The Ritualist has an Ascendancy node called Mind Phylacteries, and this node allows you to consume 25% of your maximum mana to trigger charms even when they don't have any charges left. So this means that you never have to worry about running out of charges on this charm to be able to generate the Frenzy Charges that you need. But that only solves one of the 2 problems that we have. How are we able to consistently get ourselves hit with lightning damage to proc Velocco's Roar? Well, I'm glad you asked because that is where the combination of Skold's Bridle and Lightning Coil come in. Skold's Bridle makes it so that you take a percentage of the mana that you spend on a skill as physical damage. And that physical damage dealt to yourself is converted into lightning damage via Lightning Coil, which converts a percentage of the physical damage that you take from hits into lightning damage. So this makes it so that every single time you're throwing your Glacial Lance, you're hitting yourself with lightning damage, which procs Velocco's Roar, which gives you a Frenzy Charge every single time you use Glacial Lance. And to give you a TLDR, that basically means that you're creating a winter wonderland all over the screen as you're throwing Glacial Lances at the enemies, exploding everything into bits and pieces of ice chunks. And oh yeah, did I mention that this build can also one-shot bosses? Because you're always running around with Frenzy Charges, you can build up frenzy charges before the fight and use Barrage to unleash a flurry of glacial lances that will basically take a boss from 100 to 0 in a second. So, if you want to play one of the most visually appealing and satisfying builds of this league, I would highly recommend you checking out my Glacial Lance Ritualist, which is finally the last build of this video. So that's about it. Those are the 5 builds and also an honorable mention of my favorite builds in the second month of the Last of the Druids update. I hope you guys enjoyed that list and hopefully that inspired you to play one of them or maybe make a build of your own that's inspired by one of the concepts that they presented. And as per usual, all the build links are in the description below, so please check them out. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, please, the best way to support the channel and let me know you want more of these types of videos is by hitting the subscribe button. It's completely free and lets me know that you want more of this content. On top of that, I also stream on twitch.tv/MisoXGiro every single night, so I'd love to see you guys on my stream. But if you guys can't make it to the stream, no worries. Hopefully, I'll at least see you all on the next video that I make on this channel. Alright guys, have a good one, and I'll see you all next time. Peace out. Can you believe it, guys? At this point, we are almost 3 months into the Last of the Druids update. The meta has settled, the hype builds have risen, and the bait builds have fallen. And at this point, it's pretty clear. A handful of unique items are completely shaping how Path of Exile 2 is being played right now. But it's not just the items themselves. A theme that you'll probably notice along this video is going to be the effects of the Vault.
Picture that you just cleared the campaign on your League Start character. You're at T1 maps with 0 divs in your stash and little to no rarity on your gear. When do you start farming for currency? How do you first start when you have no currency to invest? This character I'm on is my League starter in the Second Wind Private League. I started late, and by then the market had inflated with me trying to play catch up. However, I have nearly 300 div, and I've spent over 100 div to scale this character all before level 95 without selling any items or crafting. I haven't even found my first citadel, and my Val Tower looks like trash. So how did I do this? In this guide, I will walk you through my exact approach to Atlas farming upon clearing the campaign. This approach involves a stepping stone farming strategy that scales as you level and scale your character. This guide is aimed at new players and specific to farming for currency. If you need help scaling your character, I have a guide on that as well, linked at the top of the screen. Alright guys, so the main idea behind this whole strategy is to keep exploring your overworld. We are letting the game sort of dictate the fact that we're supposed to go explore, open up all of these areas, and we're just going to pay attention to a few things and make sure that we're doing things along the way that set us up for success down the road. But at the same time, we're taking advantage of what we get along the way. And there are some extremely profitable maps that you can run while you're leveling. You don't need to be doing T15s all juiced up with rarity and etc. You can do these at T6 maps and still have a really good chance at getting some really expensive loot that you can currency exchange right away for your seed money to invest in your character and continue scaling into the end game. When you first get to maps, you're going to see your quests and it's going to point you towards the corruption, and you're going to be clearing out these Nexus maps. Corrupted Nexus, and this will give you cleansed maps right here. Many of you know by now these are the most profitable maps you can run, and we're primarily going to be saving all of these cleansed maps. Matter of fact, you're going to want to pay attention to which maps you're pathing through in order to cleanse a Nexus. You don't want to end up running a lot of these on your way to the Nexus. So one map that you're going to be paying attention to as you cleanse is any map that has a mirrored fury. This is a cleansed map. You'll only see that after you clear the Nexus, and you may not see it in every group. As a matter of fact, you probably won't. It's a RNG aspect, whether or not you get a map with the mirrored fury. But that mini boss has a 100% chance to drop fracturing orbs. The next thing you're going to be paying attention to are these anomaly maps. When you come across these as you're expanding your world and exploring and clearing the Nexus, you want to run these feeder maps that will unlock this anomaly, and eventually, once you hit even T6 maps, you can run these anomalies, and these bosses have a chance to drop the rarest and most pricey, most powerful lineage support gems in the game. And a lot of them are extremely expensive. If you drop one of those early in your mapping experience, end game experience, you're going to be very happy. The chance to drop those lineage support gems is static. It doesn't change based on your rarity. Same thing with the Mirrored Fury and the Fracturing Orb. That's why we're targeting these maps as we level. So starting at T6 and beyond, you can run any of these anomaly maps that you cleared. You kill the deadly map boss, and you get about a 5% chance to get a really nice drop. Here's another one, Temporal Sandstorm. This is a really good one. We'll look at that later. Eye of the Storm is really good as well. And then I'd say the Mansion is the next best. So PoE2 database has the cheat sheet on which lineage support gems drop from which bosses. And you can see Temporal Sandstorm is big due to Garrikun's Resolve. And then Eye of the Storm drops Rakiata's Flow. And Mansion in the Mist drops Rigwald's Ferocity. And going back to PoE2 Scout, we can see that those three are all up here and very pricey. So those are the items to chase. All right, so that's like the core aim here while we're scaling and leveling. But while we're doing that, we're going to want to take advantage of the maps that we're running. So how are we tabbing, and what's the strategy there? So basically, my strategy for early from T1 on mapping is to just slam an Abyss tab. That's really as simple as it gets. Make sure that Abyss is in your maps. It is super strong. You don't have to worry about juicing it in the beginning when you really shouldn't be focused on juicing your maps. You should be focused on scaling your character and running higher level maps, getting your tier waystones up and up. And usually you'll even be running just one tab at that point. Get yourself any Abyss tab and slam it. Simple as that. The reason being, Abyss currency, you can get pretty dang lucky along your way if you're running Abyss map in, map out. Like every single map, you're running Abyss. Eventually, you're going to get pretty lucky, and you're going to get a bunch of currency that you can use to craft your own gear. Overall, win-win. Eventually, once you've scaled your character and you're actually maybe even targeting those cleansed maps, these are the sorts of waystones that I'd be targeting. Essentially, I'd move into the Omen of Light farming strategy. I also add in Asmeri Spirits. I really enjoy those. They spice up a map for sure, even though they can be a pain in the ass sometimes. But overall, pretty fun. Abyss and Asmeri Spirits go well together. Abyss and Rogue Exiles, everyone knows they go well together. Essences play well with Abyss. So Abyss has a lot of synergies overall. Just a really fun mechanic. So this modifier here, monsters in map have increased difficulty and reward. This is extremely dangerous but fun and profitable. So once you're at a level where you can run this, I highly recommend as part of your strategy. So this mod where your abyssal monsters have increased chance to have abyssal modifiers, that plays into the Omen of Light farm where you're trying to force Amanamu's Void. That's the modifier where there's a tornado looking thing, and if you kite the monster out of that and kill it while it's not standing in the void, you have a higher chance of getting that Omen of Light and other good loot, like the Omen of Echoes. And then this one additional rare monster spawn from Abyss is another way to try to force more chances at Omen of Light. That's the big ticket drop that you're chasing. However, you can see on all these, I'm doing increased effectiveness and increased rarity. I really do like that combination in general for just about anything I'm doing that requires rarity chance drops on the floor. Then lastly, if you have a juicy map that you want to run, you want to spice things up, you can, of course, force the overrun in the Abyssal. So here's the pathing I take for the Abyss farm. There's an option here to go for Rogue Exiles if you're bringing that into your farm. So you can swap Stir of the Swarm out for Shadow of Undeath if you're using Rogue Exiles. I like to get a chance to overrun the maps nearby. You're bringing in more chance for abyssal modifiers here with Unholy Influence, and then here we're choosing the right node for increased effectiveness. Again, I love effectiveness. It increases your drops dramatically. So again, this is the end state that I'm showing you, where we're talking more about the early mapping experience. I like to pick up Stir of the Swarm. Again, with this strategy, we're setting ourselves up for the future once we've scaled our character. And in this case, we're going to get a chance to overrun maps. Bookmark those. Make sure you're bookmarking your Mirrored Furies and the anomaly maps as well. The goal is to just build out your overworld with plenty of ripe opportunities for farming as we complete the quests and scale our character. For the Atlas passive tree, I will link a Mobalytics with different variations based on all of these strategies, one for leveling, one for Abyss, and one for Ritual. So here I'm in my Abyss Asmary Spirit variation, buffing the effectiveness of tablets and waystones, pretty standard. That'll be linked for you to follow along if you need. Alright, so this Abyss strategy really does require rarity, especially if you're going for Omen of Light. You are going to need 100 plus rarity on your character. And honestly, I felt like this strategy needed 150%, which is the soft cap for rarity on your character. For your Waystone, for Abyss, again, when you're leveling, it'll be just whatever blue Waystone you're running. It doesn't really matter. You just keep slamming maps and exploring. It's more about exploring and opening things up and then getting the chance at loot. Once you're at T15, 6 mod maps, use the chaotic rarity Omen here. Just make sure you've got 6 mods on your map, and then go ahead and you slam, and you've got a bunch of item rarity. Easy as that. Sometimes you've scaled the character and you're at T15 6 mods, you're feeling pretty powerful, but you've got like no rarity on your gear. So that's gonna hinder your Abyss farming and other farming that requires rarity. And in that case, Ritual becomes a very strong option to bridge the gap between that state and a state where you're just as powerful or more powerful, but you have 100 plus rarity on your character. The idea behind Ritual, the way to be efficient at this, is getting many re-rolls, as many re-rolls as you can every single map. So you're re-rolling that screen at the tribute window, and you can add re-rolls with different tablets. You can get more tribute with pack size and magic monsters in order to re-roll. And then things like increasing your chance to see omens in the window is important. You're just chasing those expensive omens. You can see today in Trade League where we stand with some of these omens. It's pretty crazy. So for the Ritual strategy, getting a re-roll on your favors on one of your rare tablets is key, because then your Freedom of Faith will double that, and you'll end up with 6 re-rolls. You get the other addition here from Tempting Offers. Then I go for Ominous Portents for more chance at omens. Always get 4 Ritual Altars, and then Pack of Wildwood Monsters. Key thing to note here is that with the tablet setup that we have, we're unable to irradiate and still benefit from the Ritual modifiers. So this Organized Forces node is extremely important for the Ritual strategy, because it will allow you to run level 80 maps whenever you have a powerful map boss. A lot of the most expensive omens will not appear in the window unless you're in a level 80 map. However, Omen of Whittling, which is an expensive chase omen, will show up in a level 79 map, so that's the target otherwise. For the Waystone on Ritual, much like with Abyss, we're using an omen, but it's chaotic monsters, so we're increasing magic monsters. Make sure you're at 6 mods, and there you go. There's a Waystone for Ritual. The last tablet that I want to talk about here is Visions of Paradise. This is what we are using for Mirrored Fury and Anomaly maps. Nothing else really matters for tablets or Waystones. I run Waystones that are easier with more revives, but this is going to give you 2 shots at the lineage support gem, and it's going to give you a guaranteed 2 fracturing orbs. So I would not run those maps until you have access to Visions of Paradise to maximize your efforts. So I've used this strategy on 2 League Start characters this league, and I avoided Temple because I didn't like it, and I did fine. Very comfortable scaling experience, could buy pretty much what I wanted to get into the builds that I was crafting. Now that I'm in the end game, I'm focused on the Abyssal Omen of Light side of things with Asmari Spirits mixed in, but I'm still exploring and opening up those same maps. They're still powerful and a good way to farm currency. So clearing the Nexus, Emired Fury, and the deadly map bosses for the lineage support gems. Hope this guide helped. If it did, please consider liking and subscribing. Until next time, take care. This is not a beginner's guide. This is not a deterministic craft template. This is a framework, a way for you to start thinking about crafting differently as you approach this complex game mechanic through the eyes of an apprentice. This is a universal blueprint you can apply to virtually any craft in Path of Exile 2. As a player with limited game time, regulated to late nights and most weekends, I have previously categorized PoE2 crafting as too much effort for my time. I have largely been able to play the game successfully my way without focusing on crafting, so why should I bother? League after league, my mentality began to shift as my game aspirations began to grow. By 0.4, I considered my lack of crafting knowledge a severe limiting factor in my quest for PoE2 glory. This league, I have made a conscious effort to level up my crafting, and that choice has exponentially increased my success in 0.4 when compared to 0.3. If this situation sounds familiar to you, this video is for you. This video moves a player from that basic understanding of mechanics to crafting apprenticeship, and the impact of this move on your in-game net wealth will surprise you. Path of Exile 2 is largely a game of chance. RNG is baked into everything. In the game of chance, successful strategies focus on skewing the odds in your favor and setting yourself up for good luck. This holds true in PoE2 crafting. Any given craft can be assigned a position on this scale. On the left end, you have complete randomness. On the right end, you have 100% deterministic, with no randomness. Your goal as an apprentice crafter is to move crafts from left to the right towards the deterministic end of the scale. The problem with this is cost. As a craft moves from left to right, becoming more deterministic, the total cost of that craft becomes greater. The exuberant cost of the most deterministic crafting in PoE2 is highly visible online and a major factor for many players choosing to ignore this mechanic. The blueprint I will now share allows an apprentice crafter to operate somewhere in the middle of this scale, at relatively low cost. The blueprint is accessible to the average player, as I consider myself average at best, and have made over 1,000 Easy Divine in 0.4 using this blueprint. In general, currencies which add modifiers to gear are cheap when compared to currencies which remove or manipulate modifiers in some way. The apprentice crafter, with limited time and limited resources, should be concerned chiefly with adding modifiers in the most deterministic way affordable to them. This blueprint largely ignores most currencies which remove modifiers and most currencies which manipulate or change modifiers in some way, as these are often too expensive for the average player. It is often more cost-effective for the average crafter to abandon a failed craft rather than to try to manipulate and force deterministic outcomes. This is chiefly due to the lack of crafting knowledge and a lack of required wealth. The basic formula for adding modifiers to a normal piece of gear is transmutation, augmentation, regal, exalt, exalt, exalt. This basic formula represents the far left of the scale, complete randomness, as we have done nothing deterministic. We have simply rolled the dice. This blueprint will walk you through low-cost, high-impact additions to this basic formula that move a craft from left to right towards the middle of our scale. Somewhere in the middle of this scale is what I view as the sweet spot that enables frequent good luck in crafting at minimal cost. This is where an apprentice crafter lives. Operating in the middle of this scale creates an environment ripe for money making and fosters further experimentation and learning. Understanding how to add affordable currencies and strategies to this basic formula to improve your odds is the blueprint. This blueprint is not a brain-off activity, and I encourage you to employ it with thought and care. To do that, you'll need to fully understand the following currencies and strategies and practice using them. You can practice them in the Craft of Exile 2 crafting simulator to get a feel for them, but eventually you'll have to risk your hard-earned currency. When crafting in the endgame for the market, I recommend never spending more than 1/20th of your currency net worth on a single craft. And preferably, you should operate closer to 1/50th and beyond. You need to be able to weather bad luck, as there is still a heavy amount of RNG, even in the middle of this scale. Preserved bones are extremely strong for adding modifiers and are the first currency you should add to the basic formula to improve your success. They simply allow you to see 3 modifier choices when adding one of your modifiers to a rare piece of gear. They also open additional modifier outcomes that are not available except with Desecration. You can pair your Desecration with Abyssal Echoes for a re-roll, showing a second set of 3 choices. Omens of Sinistral and Dextral Necromancy allow you to choose to desecrate either your prefix or your suffix. Omen of Liege, Black-Blooded, and Sovereign allow adding special modifiers tied to abyssal monsters loyal to a specific abyssal boss. The list of desecrated modifiers craftable on specific gear bases is found on Craft of Exile 2, and we'll get more into that later. Greater Essences act as a special regal on magic gear, which adds a specified modifier rather than a random one. This allows for you to be completely deterministic in the choice of 1 out of your 6 modifiers. This is powerful and affordable for most. Perfect Essences can be used on rare gear to remove a modifier and replace with a specific modifier. Pair this with Omen of Sinistral and Dextral Crystallization to define whether to remove prefix or suffix when using a Perfect Essence. These omens are a bit on the pricier side for this blueprint, but they are extremely powerful. In the early game, the currencies from our basic formula fall on the leftmost side of the scale. As you get tier 2 and 3 of these currencies, they become more deterministic by adding modifiers above a specified level threshold. This rules out the worst modifier rolls and increases the chance of rolling modifiers which require higher item levels. Using higher tier currencies has a major impact on moving a craft towards the deterministic end of the scale. Omen of Greater Exaltation allows you to add 2 modifiers with 1 exalt. This becomes a money saver when using tier 3 exalts. Corrupting is a high risk, high reward activity. Ensure you are completely finished with your craft, as corrupting will lock the gear from further crafting. As you get more experience, you will develop a feel for when risking the corruption result is worth it or not. In general, corrupting becomes less risky as the deeper in the league you are. This is because the risk of failure will have less impact on you as you have built your wealth and your personal gear. Additionally, later in the league, finishing your craft with a good corruption roll will become more of a necessity to compete with the gear that is available on the market. With practice, you will develop a sense for when a Val Orb is worth the risk. If the thought of bricking your craft is unbearable, probably best to save it for another craft or a later time. Val Orbs have a significant chance of doing nothing to the item. To remove this possibility as an outcome, use an Omen of Corruption. In 0.4, you can now double corrupt items, thus doubling down on this risky crafting step. The same guidance applies. Only the crafter will be able to weigh risk versus reward to determine best moments to double down and double corrupt, and this judgment improves with knowledge and experience. Currencies are not the only driver for moving a craft towards being more deterministic. There are also strategies and tools an apprentice crafter can use to improve outcomes. As a beginner moving to apprentice, it makes a lot of sense to craft gear that you have looted as a base, especially for practice. However, buying specific bases for your craft is a significant improvement in achieving more regular success in crafting. You do not have to target the most expensive bases. The drop in market prices for an A or B tier base compared to an S tier is drastic, while the resulting craft can be significant for either your character or your net worth. I recommend honing in on a small handful of bases that you are familiar with and attempting the same craft repeatedly. Using a dump stash full of random bases is great for practice, but inefficient and potentially costly, as you will not have as much knowledge about the gear and the target builds in all cases. Another valid reason many players are slow to adopt crafting in a meaningful way is the lack of in-game knowledge about builds and what gear is desired for those builds. This only improves with practice and experience. However, I recommend, while building that knowledge, only crafting for your own builds that you have played. This will ensure that you don't waste currency on gear that no one cares about because it does not fit a build. Eventually, with proper knowledge, you can target the meta purposefully, crafting items that are high in demand. To target the meta, PoE2 Ninja becomes very important. Taking boots, for example, we can search up a popular build and see the most popular modifiers on rare boots for that build. There are many other ways to search PoE2 Ninja, and I suggest you become very familiar with this website. This blueprint is about moving towards the deterministic end of the scale. You cannot act deterministically if you do not know the possible outcomes. This is where Craft of Exile 2 comes into play. I keep this up at all times while crafting. It tells you which modifiers can roll on which gear, their eye levels, and the odds of rolling. An example of how important this is, if you want to craft boots with 35% movement speed, Craft of Exile 2 will tell you that you need boots that are eye level 82 at a minimum in order to roll that modifier. Without that knowledge, a new crafter may end up wasting much currency chasing a modifier that will never roll. Alright guys, I hope you liked that previous segment, so now we're going to jump into more of a live crafting session. And if you've been on my streams and been following along with the content, you know that I'm essentially all about enabling casual players to have fun and be successful. Just because this game's super deep and it rewards like hours upon hours and massive amounts of game knowledge doesn't mean that a casual player can't jump in and find some success. That's what we're gonna do today with these boots, hopefully. We'll see. But we're gonna follow the blueprint that we just went over. I'll walk you through it, what I'm thinking about, and we're gonna execute. All right, so up front, we've got Craft of Exile. I brought it up several times. Really powerful tool. But we're in the emulator right here. And this is how I'm looking at bases. If you just click on boots and let's say, what did I end up doing? I think Intel Dex. You can see the bases, and really typically down here it requires level 80. You're going to see higher defensives. That's kind of how this lines up. And these are going to be the most expensive base in most cases. So you can kind of go from here or go from here however you want, depending on your budget. I think we ended up on Wanderer shoes because of how expensive these are. These are Dex Intel, which means they're a bit pricier than some other defensive bases because these are pretty popular in the meta. And so when you're deciding on what to craft based on your budget, you know, there's a balance between targeting something that's popular, where there's going to be a lot of demand for what you craft and what you want to sell. Now, this whole video, by the way, is based on trade, and a lot of this is with the idea that you're selling this, but this is also applicable if you're trying to craft something for your own build. All right, so we ended up with a couple of Black Steel Sabatons as an armor evasion base, and this is a bit less popular of a defensive base, so I figured pick up a couple cheap boots comparatively, and then some, Wanderer shoes is what we ended up with. And all of these are exceptional with the additional rune socket. For boots, I really like targeting exceptional when I can. Just really is nice getting at least the 2 rune slots, and then you can get a 3rd with your corruption, which is awesome. All right, so for the crafting cost here, Basically, I targeted bases that were worth 1 div a pop. You can go cheaper, you can go more expensive. So that's 10 div total. Perfect Exalt's about 2 div total. Echoes were the expensive thing, and those are something you can completely skip if you don't want to pour your resources into Echoes. This gives you the additional roll at 3 choices for your desecrated modifiers. Omen of Greater Exaltation, relatively cheap. And then the rest of everything is about 1 div or so. Total cost 41 divine, based on today's prices. And speaking of prices, where we're at, if you're watching this when it releases this video, the league, you know, we're deep in the league. So even though we might craft some really nice boots here, moving those boots on the market, we'll see. If you're going to make some sales, it's going to take some time right now because players have moved on to other games. So with crafting and trade, you do have to be very mindful of where you're at in the league, how many players are playing, if you don't want to get stuck with inventory. At this point in the league, I recommend mainly practicing this and knowing that it might be something that you can rely on in your league start for 0.5. But here we go. All right, so we're just slamming at first. And again, the whole blueprint is all about adding modifiers. We're not trying to lock any modifiers in with fracturing orbs. We're not using any of the currencies that remove modifiers or really manipulate in any way here. We're just adding modifiers, and we're giving up on boots that don't pan out. We're just giving up. Now, you can stash those and maybe try to like chaos slam those. That means roll a chaos over and over again just to see if you can get lucky on removing something and then adding what you need. In most cases with boots here, we need the 35% movement speed mainly. 30's okay, I guess, but at this point in the league, again, just about everybody's getting 35%. All right, so we did get a pair here with 35% movement speed, pair here. We only have 2 pairs so far with 35% movement speed. It's okay, at least we have a couple. That's nice, but we're gonna have to roll for the rest. We are going to use Greater Essence of Opulence. I really like this essence, adding rarity. I'm big on rarity, and it's kind of universal. I like using modifiers or targeting modifiers that are really universal, that doesn't pigeonhole the resulting piece of equipment into a very niche subset of the player base. So where we already had a rarity suffix, we're going to use the Ruin Essence, Greater Essence of Ruin for the chaos resistance. Especially, I like that on the armor evasion piece rather than, I guess this is evasion energy shield. But chaos is something that I kind of avoid for a full energy shield item where I think the end user would be targeting chaos inoculation. But here it worked out pretty nice. So we've got our boots, and we've got all of them should have 2 suffixes at this point. So for desecration, you can see there's no minimum modifier level on the preserved bones. If we used an ancient, we could guarantee a higher modifier, but those are pretty pricey, so we're not going to use those. But given that, I don't want to roll prefixes on these boots for our desecration when we are trying to target 35% movement speed. Now we could roll a preserved rib prefix where we already have 35% movement speed. Yeah, I'll probably do that on the boots where we have 35% movement speed just to try to target the defensives. That's the other big piece that we're trying to target on the prefixes. We've got the movement speed and then the defensives. All right, so we're gonna target the prefixes first since we only have 2 of those. So that's this one and this one here. Okay. And then for the rest, we're gonna target the suffixes for our ribs. And what that did for the remainder of our boots is it filled in our suffixes with
Oh!
all 3 modifiers, giving us a chance at 35% movement speed with perfect exalted orbs. So this has the minimum modifier level of 50, which means that if we roll a movement speed modifier on these, we are only going to roll either a 30% or a 35%. One key aspect of that we saw from Craft of Exile is that the boots have to be item level 82 or higher to roll the 35%. Alright, so since we are likely going to be using Omen of Abyssal Echoes for this to get an additional roll at the Desecration, we are going to actually fill in the rest of the modifiers to see if we actually roll the movement speed, and then that'll determine whether or not we use more currency on our boots. If we roll 35%, then yeah.
Weak. We have a lot of tabs of crap.
Glad to see you.
Hello. Keep your life.
Here for a deal? Always
The runners have brought back some interesting things.
Hail. Onward and upward, as Danig might say. Always a pleasure.
You should check out what came in from Ibenfeld.
Oh, it's you. Always a pleasure.
Maybe if I attach several blades.
What do you need? What do you need? What do you need?